Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Heir of the Uzumakis in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 25, Finding the Truth. Naruto brought Kyuubi around, aiming at Shi's side, hoping that he could stop the attack that was undoubtedly coming at him. He wasn't fast enough. He felt a powerful blow delivered to his back and he was sent flying forward, his vision flashing between red and white, and when it was restored he found himself laying against the gate at the edge of the roof. He felt a dull ache and he groaned as his eyes slowly made their way up to the area that Shi stood calmly, a bored look on the demon's face. Naruto placed his hand on the gate and pushed himself to his feet, his body protesting in agony, but his mind and heart screaming at him to get his ass in gear. As he stood he made a quick realization. The strength from that blow was tremendous and the gate had held up after he had collided with it, which could only mean one thing: the gate was nigh indestructible. Naruto remembered the small realization thankfully, since it meant that he didn't have to worry about sliding off the roof anytime soon. His arm was shaking as he brought Kyuubi up to his side and settled into the Uzumaki royal style. There would be no taking it easy in this fight. He had to use everything he had. He felt his chest rising in deep and steady bursts as he readjusted his self, calming his inner self down after the shocking hit. "We shall clash blades if you want." Shi spoke and held his right hand up, his claws slightly curled upward as his palm pointed towards the sky. What is he doing? Naruto thought, but his question didn't go unanswered for long. The blonde looked up as he heard the sky rumble. The blackness seemed to be swirling, and before he could comment on it there was a large flash of black lightning. The streak of electricity seemed to jump around in the sky as though it was hitting invisible barriers, trying to find a way to the ground. Naruto watched as it kept moving side to side, up and down in jerky motions until it came to a stop high above Shi's palm. From there it shot straight down into the demon's hand. "Ranjin, blade of the skies, ruler of storms, my trusty friend." Shi let the words roll off his blood-red lips as Naruto stared at the blade that seemed to materialize in his hand. The blade was pure white, a small and steady pulse seemed to echo throughout the blade. The hilt was blue, a yellow line wrapping around the blue. Naruto didn't dwell long upon the blade's identity since it meant very little to him. He brought Kyuubi up and pointed it directly at Shi. Kyuubi, strongest of all demons, leader of the demon kitsunes, all his power, compressed into this single blade. Naruto said and ran at the demon, using another demon to fight it. As he drew close he kept his sword pointed at Shi's chest, aimed at the area that the demon's heart should be. He shifted his weight to his left foot as it came crashing down onto the ground, and then using his momentum he spun around, Kyuubi now traveling at Shi's right hip. Naruto felt Kyuubi hit a sudden barrier and he saw Shi's right hand lazily and abnormally twisted downwards, Ranjin preventing Kyuubi from slicing him in half. Naruto didn't finish his assault there and brought his right leg round, twisting his body back around while keeping Kyuubi held in the same area, and let a roundhouse kick fly at Shi's grotesque head. Just as he felt the kick nearing the demon's face he felt his attack halted directly in its tracks. Naruto let a low breath hiss between his lips as Shi held his ankle firmly with his left leg. Naruto's foot was barely touching the demon's skin, his attack was useless. The blonde quickly shifted his weight and brought his left leg up at Shi's chin, while pulling his right leg out of the demon's grip. Before he made contact the demon disappeared from sight and he felt a sharp pain in his lower back and found himself rolling forward, Shi standing in the spot he had just stood. Damn, he's too fast. Naruto cursed inside his mind as he got to his feet and fell back into a fighting stance. He stared at Shi evenly before he ran, another attempt at attacking. "Do you feel the hopelessness?" Shi asked the simple question as he leaned to the right, dodging a sword slash aimed at his face. He brought his left hand around and it connected with Naruto's face, making the boy corkscrew into the air before he slammed into the ground. "You are weak. This isn't a challenge for me." Shi said these words with disgust as he walked towards Naruto, who was on his knees, a line of blood stretching from his mouth. As the demon drew closer he brought his leg back and slammed his foot into Naruto's gut. The blonde felt the air rush out of his lungs as the powerful kick connected with him. He was sent rolling a little further and as he came to a rest he felt another kick slam into his gut again. "You spoke of how you would beat me. You screamed those words." Shi screamed at Naruto and reached down, grabbing the boy's hair and pulled him to his feet. The demon snarled as he turned on his heel and hurled the teen at the other side of the roof at insane speeds. Naruto felt himself flying, Kyuubi still held uselessly in his right hand. As he turned his head he saw himself getting closer to the gate before it was blocked by the view of Shi appearing before him, then that sight was blocked as Shi's foot connected with his face sending him flying upwards. Impossible, this strength. Naruto thought as he flew higher, his body flipping head over heels. You're nothing but talk. Shi growled as he appeared above Naruto, his body flickering into sight as he raised his left fist. Naruto flew upwards still, and when the boy reached the height of being right at Shi's waist the demon brought his fist down, slamming it into Naruto's gut, sending the boy hurtling towards the ground. Boom! Naruto collided with the concrete and he heard a slight cracking sound and his head rolled to the left and he saw a large mass of spider-webbed cracks spreading about him as though they were trying to escape punishment from the god that was beating the boy. Naruto watched as Shi landed lightly on his left foot, Ranjin held loosely in his right hand. We have fought for only 10 minutes and already he has me beaten. Naruto thought sadly as he began to cough, blood spraying from his mouth. Foolish mortal. Shi whispered the words as he began to walk forward. You believe yourself to be powerful enough to reach any goal, achieve any dream. Shi stood above Naruto. You can't even save yourself, much less others. Your uncle will be the first to die, followed by Haku-chan, and then slowly I'll kill all those precious to you. Shi said as he smiled evilly, his head shaking slightly as he taunted Naruto. He turned away from the blonde boy, planning on letting him suffer for a little bit. As he turned his back he stared at the cloud of nothingness that slowly crept closer to them like an assassin. That was the true enemy here, time. I must destroy this foolish mortal, but first I must break him. Shi's thought was interrupted as he heard a labored breathing behind him. Threaten me, all you want. Naruto whispered as he wiped blood from his mouth and flicked his wrist, Kyuubi landing in a reverse grip so that the hilt was in his hand while the silver blade was pointed down at the ground and to his right. But when you threaten my family, Naruto said as his head slowly rose up and he made eye contact with Shi. You sign your death warrant. He finished and his eyes flashed red. No. Shi thought as Naruto glared at him with red eyes. The demon's eyes slowly traveled down to Kyuubi and he saw that the normally silver blade had a thin red outline thriving around it. That fucking mutt. The demon thought as he realized the Kyuubi no Kitsune's cunning trick. Sorry it took so long before I got it together, guys. Naruto thought as a mental image of his friends and family appeared before him. The real battle begins here. XXXXX. About time that brat got serious. The Kyuubi growled as he felt his chakra finally being drawn upon by his jailer. Hopefully he can figure out how to beat this demon before it's too late. The Kyuubi chuckled darkly as he closed his eyes and fell into a deep slumber. It had been a while since he had slept, but now it was alright. Naruto had gotten some power to even the unfair odds. The demon shall witness the true power of a demon. The Kyuubi whispered before he fell into his slumber. XXXXX. Naruto dashed at Shi, moving faster than he had been able to just the previous day. Shi brought Ranjin up in front of him just as Naruto slashed at the demon's neck. Both blades met and a shower of red sparks showered both combatants. Shi glared at Naruto, the teen's red eyes were trying to burn a hole in the demon's face. Tell me something. Naruto yelled as he threw a punch at Shi's face. The demon dodged easily and jumped away from the boy. What is it, you failure? Shi snarled as he ran at Naruto, swinging Ranjin downwards at him, hoping to cut him from left shoulder to right hip. Naruto grabbed the tip of Kyuubi and brought the blade up and stopped Ranjin on the flat of Kyuubi's blade. He grunted as Shi applied more strength to his blade, making Naruto's arms slowly push downward. Why aren't I at full power? Naruto hissed as he rolled to the right and lashed his blade out at Shi's knee. The blonde smirked as Shi brought Ranjin down to block but only managed to deflect the blade, which arced downwards, making a shallow cut in the demon's lower right leg. Shi hissed out of anger, not so much pain. None of your concern, he said as he brought his fist down into Naruto's face. The blonde didn't expect the sudden attack and he felt his face cry in protest as the attack made him slam into the ground and actually bounce into the air. As he spun in midair he saw Shi disappear on a flicker and reappear above him. Maybe it's because you have always been this weak, Shi said with bloodlust, and he clasped both hands over Ranjin's hilt and slammed his fist into Naruto's back, sending the boy hurtling down at the already cracked ground. Boom. 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 Naruto felt his body screaming in pain, his mind threatening to shut down, his will starting to dwindle again. She had struck him with enough force to break through the roof and into the next room, but Naruto kept traveling downwards. He felt his body shudder with each jarring impact of himself slamming into the floor of a new level of the temple. Slowly he felt himself losing speed until he slammed into one more floor and he heard a few boards break, otherwise he managed to stay on this floor. Naruto moaned as he felt his body burn as though he had been lit on fire. The blonde couldn't get to his feet and so he opted to just rolling over slowly and looking up through the hole he had created. He counted the floor he had traveled through and winced when he landed on 5, not counting the roof. He was taking deep ragged breaths as he looked around and found Kyubi lying uselessly in a pile of debris. The sword was impaling the top of the pile, but it was too far for Naruto to reach. This blade. She muttered as he appeared before the pile of broken cement and wood. That damn demon. He found a way into this realm and was able to feed you his chakra from the outside. She hissed as he grabbed the sword and turned towards Naruto. You make me sick. The demon whispered this and Naruto could only helplessly roll over and get on his hands and knees, his eyes still watching she as he dropped the blade onto the ground. No. Naruto whispered as she raised Ranjin above his head, a black substance surrounded the sword. She let his eyes flicker upward, a cruel smile crossing his face as he looked into Naruto's eyes. One of the blonde's eyes was red while the other was blue, signifying his severed connection from Kyubi's chakra. Reimayutsu. Naruto watched as she slammed Ranjin down on the middle of Kyubi's blade, but what really made his breath catch was what happened as the Ranjin made contact with Kyubi. As soon as the blade touched Kyubi, a strike of thunder shot down the holes that Naruto had created and slammed into the area that Ranjin met Kyubi. Naruto was forced to throw a hand up in front of his face as the entire tower was bathed in a black or red flash of light. The entire tower shook while Naruto's ears rung, the sound of thunder echoed loudly. Crack. Naruto heard it before he saw it, felt it before he saw it. As the light faded he looked towards the area that Kyubi now lay shattered, most of the blade gone, turned into small shards that were no threat. The hilt was still intact, a small shard of blade still connected to the hilt, but the blade would not be able to be used in battle. Ha ha, ha ha, ha 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 ha. She laughed darkly as he looked at the remains of Kyubi, and as the two fighters watched, a small red cloud rose from the broken sword and quickly dissolved into thin air before small wisps floated away until they too were gone. Kyubi, no. Naruto whispered as his only weapon lay before him broken. The blonde bit his lip, holding back the curses he wanted to fire off at the demon before him. The blonde slowly and shakily stood to his feet, his eyes kept focused on she who was watching him with a cold smile on his face. What was that? Naruto asked with an emotionless voice. He had just seen and used Kyubi's chakra, he felt it. Kyubi had told him that there was no way for the boy to use his chakra in this realm, but he had just used the fox's chakra, which was a part of his own. Naruto wiped blood from his forehead as it dripped down, obscuring his vision. That was your one last hope. You surprised me with that small power boost, but it was unsubstantial. She let his cold smile fall from his face as he held Ranjin in front of him. Naruto watched as the blade slowly began to break down until it was a simple cloud that slowly rose into the air before it faded from sight, just as Kyubi had, the only difference being that she could call upon the sword again while Naruto could do no such thing. You have disappointed me greatly, Naruto. She spoke these words with a sad tone. Naruto glared at him before he raised his hands. His right hand was held palm down at his right hip while his left hand was spread wide and his left arm was tilted downward while bent at the elbow. His feet slowly slid apart and he prepared himself to engage in battle with Taijutsu. Tell me your story, Naruto said as he ran at Shi. He threw a punch at the demon's head, and as the being ducked under the punch, Naruto brought his right knee up at Shi's face. The demon leaned to the right and struck out quickly, his fist making contact with Naruto's calf, sending a small jolt up the boy's leg. Naruto hissed in pain but continued his assault. He kicked his right leg out to the side, ignoring the pain in it, and cursed as it narrowly missed Shi's face. The demon rolled backwards and sprung to his feet and leveled his gaze on the panting Naruto, who stood waiting for the next round of close combat. My story? Why should I share my story with a ruthless mortal who will soon be destroyed? She asked with disgust disguising the four echoing voices. Naruto shrugged his shoulders as he ran at Shi again, and as he lashed out with a kick at the demon's chin he spun around, instead bring his right leg that he had kicked with down into the demon's knee. Shi hissed in anger as he stumbled slightly but slammed his fist into Naruto's face, making the blonde wheel backwards before rubbing his sore cheek tenderly. Well. Naruto grumbled and let his gaze travel up to Shi. I want to know just how you came to exist within me. Naruto said and ran at Shi again, but the demon didn't allow him to make the first strike. Instead he waited until Naruto was just within range to unleash his attack. Shukyaku Hanketsu. Shi moved with lightning speed, his long black arms a blur as they slammed into Naruto's face, followed by his right shoulder making the blonde spin around before a fist slammed into his gut making him hunch over. Shi's foot glowed black with a strange chakra as the demon did a backflip, his foot connecting with Naruto's face sending the boy hurtling upwards and backwards. Shi disappeared in a black flash, reappearing just below Naruto where he jumped up and grabbed Naruto's neck and did a quick flip in the air, gathering momentum as he slammed Naruto back down to the ground. Naruto flew at the wooden floor, slamming into and in the process he destroyed some more wooden planks. Naruto coughed a large wad of blood and saliva flying from his mouth. Shi landed next to him and lightly spun on his heels, and he slammed the side of his foot into Naruto's side making the boy slide across the floor, through the debris pile, and into the wall where he hit it with a solid thump. Naruto felt his vision darkening, but through willpower alone he managed to keep himself conscious. You want to know my origins? Shi asked with disgust as he held his black hands out in front of him. The strange black chakra that had covered his foot now covered his hands and both his feet. The demon walked towards the blonde and grabbed him by his neck and held him in the air. He threw him up into the air and screamed for no apparent reason. I'll show you my pain. Saishu Tekanabatsu. Shi disappeared again, but didn't reappear. The only thing that signified him moving was Naruto's body jerking and twitching in midair. The blonde was being hit from every angle, his body flipping around uselessly, screaming in pain as Shi bounced off of the walls with speed that made Matogai and Rock Lee seem slower than a tortoise. Suddenly Naruto fell to the ground limply, breathing raggedly. Bruises, gashes, and burn marks littered his body. His eyes were closed and Shi landed next to him, his three eyes glaring at the boy with hate and contempt. Give up. Shi screamed as he slammed his fist into Naruto's gut, and the boy's only response was to cry out in pain, blood erupting from his mouth as he began to cough. I need you to give up. Shi hissed as he grabbed Naruto by the hair and knelt down, holding the boy up slightly so he could whisper in the boy's ear. You want to hear my story? How I was created? Shi whispered and received no answer and continued on. I was a seed as were you. When your mother conceived you I was born from her. Her own demon, the thing within her, gave part of its essence to you. That is what I am. I came from the same root of the same demon that has been in your clan for its entire existence and before them even. As the first demon spread its essence around men's inner evils, hate, depression, lust, greed and all other negative emotions slowly fed that essence within them, and over time their inner demon became what they were. That's what I am. Every negative emotion you have ever felt. I am greed, anger, hate, sadness, I am everything that you tried to lock away. Shi screamed the last part, his spit landing in Naruto's limp blonde hair. He dropped the boy to the ground and slowly stood to his feet, slightly panting from screaming in anger. The boy wouldn't learn his lesson at all. I am the pure evil in your soul. I am your bloodlust. I give you power. You are nothing without me, but with me you are a god. Shi whispered, his words trying to seduce Naruto's ears. The demon heard a small gurgle come from Naruto's lips and a cold grin crossed his face. This was what he needed. The demon slowly crouched down and leaned towards Naruto trying to hear what the boy was saying. Say it louder, I need to hear it. Shi hissed and he heard Naruto begin to whisper again. The blood in his lungs made it hard for the boy to talk. I know why I am weak now. Naruto said and coughed slightly, blood trickling down his cheek again. Shi's eyes widened as he waited in anticipation for the blonde to submit. This was the way for him to gain true power. Why are you weak, mortal? Shi asked, his voice oozing hate and lust. His black slit eyes stared at Naruto while his third red slit eye closed as it began to charge itself. You. Naruto whispered and his eyes slowly opened, his blue irises slowly drifted over to Shi. You just told me why. Yes. You need me. Do you understand this now? She snarled as the mortal began to understand. Wrong, dumbass. Naruto said as he clenched his teeth. Shi's claws were digging into his arm as the boy rejected the demon's words. His black slit eyes were glaring at Naruto, coldness was radiating from the being. You aren't real. You fool. Shi screamed and slammed his fist into Naruto, the floor beneath them exploded again and they fell onto the next floor. Naruto landed in a heap and he groaned in agony, he could figure out the answer. She had almost explained it to him but it didn't answer the most important question. Naruto let his head fall to the side where she was standing, Ranjin in his hand again. You die now. The demon hissed but Naruto shook his head and slowly rolled over and began to push himself up. I asked you why I was so weak. Naruto muttered as he got to his knees and was panting. But now I know, it took me this long to figure it out but it all makes a little bit of sense now. Naruto said as he began to slowly rise to his feet. It took you making your final mistake earlier. Naruto said, his right leg was up, his foot planted on the ground, his right hand resting on his knee and he continued to fight against his body's fatigue. This was the end of the battle almost, and Naruto knew that he had not much more in him. I'm not able to use chakra, everyone has chakra though, the only way to not have it is to be dead. Naruto said as he clenched his teeth ignoring the pain that shot through his chest as he attempted to force himself up but he collapsed back down onto one knee. I'm not dead. I know that. But I can't use chakra, which means there is something going on. At first I would have believed that Dem Fox when he told me that we were in your world and you controlled everything here and weren't just allowing me to use chakra, but I just realized something. Naruto said as he let out a slow breath as he pushed himself to his feet and swayed back and forth. Flashback _ Okay, so the reason that you are here is to fight that guy, Shi, is to see if you can withstand the curse. If you can't then you die and he takes your body, if you manage to beat him you gain more power. Only there are some things that make this challenging. You have no chakra so jutsu is out of the picture, he is no doubt stronger than you, and also he has had time to find all of your weaknesses in life. Kyuubi said and Naruto groaned and covered his face with his hands. Flashback. Sometimes curses aren't physical. Naruto whispered. She looked at him with hate and contempt but also with a small grin on his face as the boy continued on. The demon wanted to see what the teen had figured out so far, the demon doubted that the pathetic kid had actually figured out the truth. Kyuubi was sealed within me, that is a curse. I was alone, that was a curse. I was hated, that was a curse. Sometimes curses are emotional or spiritual. Naruto said as he continued to remember Kyuubi's words. You die and he takes your body. If you want my body you wouldn't be destroying me like you are. Naruto whispered and Shi's grin slowly dropped as Naruto began to make sense, as he began to speak the truth. You keep telling me to give up. Time to find all of your weaknesses in life. You have had time to get all of my weaknesses ready. You know everything bad thing that could hurt me. Naruto said as he slowly brought his gaze up to meet Shi's. You know every horrible part of my life, every negative thing. Shi gripped Ranjin tighter, he had not expected the boy to get this far into the truth. He began to walk forward but Naruto continued on ignoring this. Shi needed to finish this now before the truth was spoken, before he was beaten. This battle wasn't supposed to happen like this. He had done what his ancestors hadn't. He was the strongest of all demons, he had so much more power than this blonde fool, yet he now was experiencing fear that he might be beaten. You've been beating me senseless, and I have no doubt that you are stronger than me. But that's not what this is about, is it? Naruto asked and Shi let out an angry growl as he picked up his speed running forward, but he found that his actions were slightly slower than they were just 5 minutes ago. The demon hissed as his third eye opened and released the power it had been gathering, all of it channeled towards Ranjin, which was pointed straight out in order to pierce the blonde boy. His hand slowly moved towards his sword. Shi seemed to notice this action and then the sword, and he frowned before smiling. I see the Kyuubi has helped you out, oh well, I'll let it slide. If I wasn't able to use chakra, then why was a being made of chakra able to come into this realm? Why was I able to use his chakra in our fight? You see, Kyuubi was sealed inside of me, and he became a curse that I carried with my soul. Naruto said, and she let out a loud bellow that almost made Naruto lose his train of thought, but he continued on. He had to finish this. He was about to die anyways, no matter what she did, or tried. He had beaten Naruto so much that the boy could feel the life slipping out of him right now as he spoke his final words. The reason I don't have any physical strength is because... Naruto whispered as she drew closer, the blade glowing black. I am my soul right now. This isn't my physical body. You are also part of my soul. The curse of the Uzumakis isn't a demon all in of itself. The curse of the Uzumakis is that we have the essence of a demon within us, but we create our own demise over time. We create the perfect weapon to kill ourselves. The curse of the Uzumakis. Naruto said and opened his eyes. She was directly in front of him. Is ourselves. The blonde finished in a sad whisper. Saishumo Kitkichi. Squelch. To be continued. Chapter 26, The Heir of the Uzumakis. The reason I don't have any physical strength is because... Naruto whispered as she drew closer, the blade glowing black. I am my soul right now. This isn't my physical body. You are also part of my soul. The curse of the Uzumakis isn't a demon all in of itself. The curse of the Uzumakis is that we have the essence of a demon within us, but we create our own demise over time. We create the perfect weapon to kill ourselves. The curse of the Uzumakis. Naruto said and opened his eyes. She was directly in front of him. Is ourselves. The blonde finished in a sad whisper. Saishumo Kitkichi. Squelch. XXXXX. The depth of a man's soul cannot not be measured in a manner of meters or fathoms, but rather it of the opinion of some it is quantified by his proximity to either heaven or hell. XXXXX. Naruto's eyes widened with shock, pain, and disbelief before they slowly closed, his eyes half-lidded as he stared at his inner demon. She stood glaring at him, his face contorted in rage, his body mere inches from Naruto. Ranjin pierced through the center of Naruto's chest, blood running down the blonde boy's back and chest. Blood seeped from the corner of his mouth also, a steady stream, but he was accepting. You fool! She whispered as he tightened his grip on Ranjin's hilt. You think you stand above me? How dare you insult my powers? The demon raged as he twisted the blade gruesomely, making Naruto cough, blood splattering the demon's face, adding to his hideous and fearful-looking face. Naruto let a whimper of pain vibrate his throat as he brought his hands up on blade of Ranjin, holding it steady as his body shook. He was going into shock. No, I don't doubt you powers. You're stronger than me, much stronger than I could ever hope to be right now. Naruto whispered since he wasn't capable of raising his voice anymore. She had managed to somehow, whether it be by fate or some small margin of luck, stab Ranjin straight through the middle of the blonde's chest, only nicking Naruto's right lung instead of piercing it. Even though it was a slight nick, the man had still destroyed Naruto's sternum, and the lung was also beginning to fill with blood, slowly, but still filling with his blood. Then why do you fight? Why do you cling to your worthless life? What is your reason for existence? She demanded as he pushed the blade deeper into Naruto, which only resulted in the blade being pushed further out of his back and making she come that much closer to the dying blonde. Naruto stared at the demon, his eyes slowly dimming, but still he thought about the question. He seriously thought about it. He didn't just give a simple answer, not his ninja way. Naruto's right hand fell from the blade and hung limply at his side while his left hand still clutched the blade that was piercing him, his blood slowly flowing down its length down to Shi's hand. The blood seemed to taint the blade that was white, seemed to infect it with a foreign feeling or intrusion. If you had asked me that question 5 years ago, I might not have been able to. Naruto began to cough violently, more blood flying from his mouth. Been able to answer. But now, my reason for existence, the reason I fight, the reason I cling to my worthless life, is to protect those I love. Naruto said this as more blood streamed from his mouth. He ignored the taste of iron and instead focused on Shi, his inner demon. Pathetic. Shi spat as he twisted the blade yet again, making Naruto cry out in pain, his left hand falling from the blade, soaked in his own blood. Humans continue to amaze me with their worthless goals. Why protect others, why accept them when all they can do in the end is hurt you? Shi whispered as he trained all 3 of his eyes on Naruto. You are weak, just like all of the others who have stood before their demons. The Uzumakis, I spit on their name. She hissed, and Naruto looked into Shi's eyes. His blue eyes that were once vibrant were even duller now, almost gray, lifeless. What do you mean? Naruto said in his hoarse voice. He didn't have much time left, and in the end he just hoped for the truth. She stared at him before laughing darkly. His teeth flashed as though they reflected his inner hate and cruelty. There has never been an Uzumaki who has stood before their inner demon and beaten them. Only the Uzumaki have done that. In all of my years, of every essence that I was born from, only 2 were able to beat their demons. Pathetic excuses for ninja as you call yourselves. Not able to beat even themselves, not able to embrace themselves. His spoke in a cold and steady voice. Naruto once again noticed the 4 overlapping voices that seemed to echo as he talked. Hey! Naruto whispered as he slowly reached up with his left hand and grabbed Shi's right shoulder. The demon was shocked that the boy was still trying to fight. He brought a hand up and a ball of pure darkness began to form inside of it, slowly spinning as it began to collect energy. Beneath the 2 of them, the black circle that represented the remaining time in the realm had almost completely overtaken the white. Almost there. She thought victoriously. He was about to summon more energy into the ball to finish the boy off, but a sudden change of events happened, something that she had not predicted. Naruto reached up with his right hand and grabbed Shi's other shoulder, and with a small grunt he pulled the demon closer to him, the sword burying itself up to the hilt inside the blonde. Blood started to run out of Naruto's mouth at a faster pace, dripping down on the blade of the sword while she stared at him in disbelief. The ball of destruction in his hand dispersed before small wisps of blackness floated into the air before disappearing. I was hated, everyone in the village hated me. It was so intense, and they beat me just for what I held, but I didn't know back then. They took their sorrow, anger, confusion, any emotions they had that were connected to the Kyuubi, they took them out on me. And while I was being beat, I was always able to forgive them. My hate just disappeared, and it was gone. I continued to strive for their attention, a way to make my presence known to everyone. I harbor no ill feelings towards the people of Konoha. I don't hate anyone. Loathing, envy, jealousy. Naruto whispered in a haggard tone. She stared at him still as he muttered incoherent words that made no sense to the demon. I remember sometimes feeling as close to hate as I could towards others my age. I was jealous that they got to go home and eat dinner with their families. That they got to sleep in a warm bed, that they had everything I didn't. I envied that lifestyle and began to loathe my luck, loathe my very existence, but soon I felt those feelings go away as I began to deal with things and put a mask up. Soon I just wished that I would feel a small change in my life. I no longer watched other kids with their parents, I just knew, and I got over my petty jealousy and soon began to strive to gain skills like others my age had in the academy. Tears fell from the blonde's dying eyes as he brought his gaze back up to Shi's. The demon was in shock. The boy was crying about something, some human thing. She hissed and was about to speak when Naruto spoke more words that made no sense. Wanting to be forgiven for something out of your control. Naruto whispered as he shook his head slowly, sadly, desperately. I remember being kicked, punched, stabbed, and the entire time. I begged for mercy, for forgiveness for something that I didn't do. I had no idea what I wanted forgiveness for, but I still cried out for it. My sorrow was great, but I hid that too. I suppressed the feeling until it was buried deep within myself, until I began to forgive instead of being forgiven. I forgave people for their cruelty, for the abuse I didn't deserve, and even now, I don't wait for someone to come and tell me that they are sorry. I know that deep down that it is what my heart wants, but it isn't necessary for me. Why is that? I get it now. Naruto whispered and she froze. I understand it all. It took me dying to finally get it. Naruto said as he slowly lowered his arms. My feelings, all my feelings that I tried to hide and suppress. They never went away, did they? He whispered and she stared at him, not answering. Then Naruto did something that made the demon release his hold on the sword in his hand. Naruto leaned forward and wrapped his bloody form around Shi. Naruto hugged the demon. I was so lonely. No one heard me. Denied the very basic things. I lived alone for years. Crying out to no one. Hoping that someone would hear my cries. See my tears. Feel my pain. Taste my agony. Smell my fear. But even after wishing, even after praying, even after watching and seeing every shooting star, no one answered. You are everything I tried to hide. You are years of pain and hate. You aren't a demon. Naruto whispered, and she felt something warm inside himself. Naruto pulled away as he felt the demon tremble slightly, not making a sound. The blonde watched as the third eye on Shi's forehead slowly closed before disappearing. His other two eyes lost their color, fading away, before they returned a soft blue that held pain inside them. No. Shi whispered as he tried to step away, but Naruto held his hands on Shi's arms, holding the demon there with all of his remaining strength before he died. You might have the essence of a demon, but you said it yourself, you grew from man's hatred and other negative emotions. Naruto said as he felt a small burning sensation in his feet, and he realized that he was slowly beginning to die, probably fading away, and Shi was starting to take over his body. Naruto watched slowly as the horns that decorated Shi's head began to recede, and the blonde swore that Shi's hair began to grow shorter and shorter, but it was hard to tell. Shut up, you foolish mortal! Shi screamed as he grabbed Naruto's arms and tried to peel the human off himself. You are just my negative emotions that I tried to hide. You aren't a demon, you're my inner demons. That is how you knew so much about me, what I feared, what I hated. Naruto muttered as he continued to watch Shi's changes as the burning in his feet spread up to his knees. You know nothing of me. Shi screamed as he ripped his right hand from Naruto's left arm and grabbed Ranjin and attempted to pull it out. Naruto reacted slowly but managed to grab Shi's hand after he pulled the sword a few inches from his body. The demon screamed in fury as Naruto fought for control of the weapon. The curse, it isn't about beating you, is it? Naruto asked, and he watched as Shi's teeth and claws shrunk and became normal. The demon's arms faded back to the same color as his pale skin and slowly began to shrink until they were the size of normal human arms. The burning in Naruto's legs quickly spread to his stomach, making him mentally cry out. He was about to die. Shi was gaining control. Shut up. Shi screamed, and Naruto noticed something. The four voices he heard slowly began to fade. First the voice that held the hatred he heard, followed by the voice of loathing and jealousy. Naruto watched as Shi's hair stopped shrinking and started to resemble his own again. Naruto felt the burning creep slowly upward. It's about accepting you, it's about embracing the darkness within myself, not trying to vanquish it. You can't have light without dark. You can't have chakra without spiritual energy. You can't have love without friends. Naruto said as Shi screamed in pure rage, but it only held one voice now. Loneliness. Shi. I don't hate you. Naruto said, and the demon in front of him began to shrink. Don't be jealous because, you have me and through me you have others. Shi's scream turned into a strangled cry and the burning in Naruto intensified. This was it, Naruto's world was over. Shi was about to take control, but he wanted to at least fix the things he had done, try to make the demon less angry at the world. I forgive you for everything you have put me through, all the pain you have caused. Naruto said this, and Shi's voice abruptly ended. The demon now stood face to face with Naruto. The darkness that had been the remaining time touched the corners of the walls. Time was up. Shi, come back to me, complete my soul. I won't let you be lonely anymore. Swoosh. The burning in Naruto intensified, and it felt like he was being slowly roasted in a fire. He screamed in agony. The pain of being pierced by a sword was nothing compared to what he was feeling now. He felt the burning sensation making its way from his feet to his head and back again, the process going on and on for what seemed like years until it stopped. Just like that. It was over. I lost. Naruto whispered as tears flowed from his face. He fell to the ground, his eyes closed as tears made their way from the corners of his eyes. The pain in his chest was gone, the pain from his heart was gone, the pain from his journey was gone. All the pain was gone. After I went through so much, I failed everyone. Naruto said in a hoarse voice, and clenched his fist. Wait. The thought hit Naruto like Shi had as they fought. Naruto opened his eyes and looked around. Everything was white. There was nothing, no blackness. The sky was so white it almost hurt the blonde's eyes to look at it. Sight. Pain. Where am I? Naruto whispered as he looked at the ground he lay upon. It was out of place in the white realm that he lay in. It was a circular platform, only 10 feet in diameter, and it seemed to just be floating in nothingness. How did you do it? A voice asked from behind the blonde, and Naruto stiffened. He slowly turned to find a black mist floating a few feet from him. It wasn't very large, maybe the size of his torso. The only intimidating thing about it was its red eyes. Other than that, it seemed to have no physical form. How did you manage to beat me? The voice asked in desperation. I did everything I should have. I brought you to a realm where you had no powers. I beat you with every mentally scarring thing you have endured, but you still won. Naruto asked in disbelief. He took a step forward, but he stiffened when he found he could not approach anymore. What is wrong with your form? Why aren't I dead? Naruto asked as he looked around. Where are we? Naruto whispered in awe. You beat me. Don't you get it? You won somehow. She tried to hiss, but it came out as a hollow whisper, almost like a breeze of wind slowly blowing by. This is my true form. She said as his body swirled around, his red eyes still focused on Naruto. This is the essence passed from mother to daughter. What? Naruto asked as she said the last part. The blonde stared at she in disbelief and shook his head. No. I'm not a girl. Naruto said in utter disbelief. I know. She said, and Naruto became quiet, waiting for she's explanation. I realized that I might be able to finally achieve what many others could not. The essence of the Shinkyuani is passed from mother to her offspring, but it can only affect the female offspring. That is why I thought I had a chance. You were the first of the Uzumaki males to ever receive the power of the demon, the chance for me to take control. She said, but he growled lowly. But I failed. Naruto lowered his eyes until he was staring at the ground in disbelief. How come only females got the gene? That would mean my mother, she fought her demon, didn't she? Naruto asked in a small whisper, and she seemed to stare at Naruto before chuckling darkly. Yes, she did. She was one of the only 2 female Uzumakis to ever defeat their Shinkyuani. She said, and Naruto let a small smile grace his lips. Why am I any different than any other male Uzumaki? Why did I have to endure this? Naruto asked, and she snorted. If a pure essence can snort, it should be obvious. Your DNA was altered due to another thing being placed inside of you. Whatever genetic makeup that made it possible for males to avoid this process was altered within your body. She said, and Naruto nodded before he dismissed the topic. If he had truly won, then he would be able to discuss it more in depth with Zabuza. So I won. Naruto said, earning a low growl from she. Was I right? Naruto asked, and the demon seemed to avert its gaze, and Naruto understood that he was right indeed. So my soul was really split? Naruto whispered in disbelief. No. You're just stubborn enough to suppress all your inner demons, every negative emotion, and that made it easier for me to grow stronger, not to mention all of the hate and bloodlust that Kyuubi gave off. She said, and Naruto seemed to lighten up at this slightly. Here I thought I was never truly myself, he thought with relief. So what happens now? Naruto asked as he looked deep into Shi's eyes. This was the end. He had won, and now it was time to figure out just what he gained from this. Both demon and blonde stared at each other for a while before the pure essence of the demon lowered its red eyes. Now you absorb me and you gain the ability to access power you have never felt. This is a bloodline, as you may call it. To me it is just a simple transformation and use of demon power. She said, and Naruto stared at the demon in pure shock. He had a bloodline. All he had to do was absorb the pure essence of the demon, and he'd have more power. What happens when I use this power? Naruto asked curiously. You go through a transformation akin to what I did, only not as grotesque, by human definitions. She said, and Naruto nodded, his face serious. You would gain more chakra, your speed would increase greatly, your strength, everything. You would become a demon-human hybrid. Naruto stared at Shi in shock as he contemplated what was just said. No. Naruto said, and Shi seemed to freeze, his misty appearance no longer swirling. What? What do you mean no? Am I not good enough for a mortal like yourself? She screamed in outrage, but Naruto held up a hand, his face set in a steely expression. No, I have one demon in me as it is. I don't need another. Naruto said and turned his back. Besides, what is the point in gaining such a strong power? To rule? I would much rather work for my own power. Naruto said, and that was when he heard something in the distance. A slow rumble that slowly turned into crackling. No, it can't be. She whispered from behind Naruto. Naruto was about to turn around to find out what she was whispering about, but before he could react, a streak of black lightning emerged from nowhere, hissing as it sped at Naruto and pierced him through the chest, making the boy scream in agony. As soon as it happened, it was over, leaving the blonde to fall to his knees, panting as he felt a tingling sensation run through his body, sparks flying from his fingertips. The boy, still panting, turned towards she, and instead of looking at the demon he found himself looking at a sword. A familiar white sword. Ranjin was impaled in the ground as though the lightning had raced through his body and speared into the ground behind him, making the sword. Why is your sword here? Naruto whispered, and she didn't answer. Instead the demon closed its red eyes, blackness overcoming its entire face. You are indeed special Uzumaki Naruto. Ranjin has never shown itself before a mortal, never given a mortal the chance to wield its powers. She whispered before he opened his eyes. You have proven yourself to this sword somehow, maybe it was your words. You want to achieve greatness with your own power? Well, here is your means. She whispered, and Naruto looked from sword to demon back to the sword. Do you mean? Naruto asked, and she's only response was to remain quiet for a while, making Naruto wonder what was going on. If you mean, am I going to be eradicated from existence, then yes, you have embraced the light and with that have gained the ability to wield Ranjin. She spoke in a sorrowful tone. If you are eradicated from existence, then that means, my children will not receive the essence of Shinkyu-Ani. Naruto asked in a whisper, and she nodded. Naruto felt sorrow irradiating from the essence again, and Naruto took a step closer but halted as he felt a spark of lightning jump from his hand to the hilt of Ranjin. You say that I embraced the light? Naruto whispered as he slowly pulled Ranjin from the ground, the blade coming out of it easily as though it was meant for Naruto's hand. The hilt was a perfect fit, the blade was so light it felt as though it wasn't there. As soon as Naruto held the blade before him, he let a small smile cross his face. I said, come back to me, she. Naruto said, and the demon stared at him. Embracing the light means embracing everything. Naruto whispered and held the sword up. As long as I embrace you, then you will never be eradicated. As long as I seal you within Ranjin, I will destroy this curse that haunts the Uzumaki, and I will also save your essence. Naruto spoke and held Ranjin horizontally out in front of himself. Come to me, she, be my weapon and help me find my own powers. Naruto spoke, and she felt a sudden pull. And no way. The demon muttered. The mortal was claiming him, not as a means to become instantly powerful but as a means to save the demon. Why? She screamed as he was pulled towards the Ranjin, which was starting to glow. Because, you helped me find who I really am. I put you through so much hell, it wouldn't be fair to just let you get eradicated. Naruto said as she was pulled closer to him. The demon felt its essence hit the blade of Ranjin. Besides, I told you. I won't let you be alone anymore. Naruto said, and she was pulled into the blade of Ranjin. Naruto! She screamed. Thank you. She finished as he disappeared, and then there was a large flash of black light. Naruto cried out in shock and held onto Ranjin tightly. His eyes were closed tightly as the light felt as though they were burning them. I will help you on your quest to become strong and protect those near to you. Naruto opened his eyes as he felt the light finally fade, and when he looked at Ranjin he gasped. The blade he had fought against, the blade that had chosen him, was no more. That old blade was pure white, with a blue hilt and yellow wrapping around it. Nothing fancy, rather plain actually. In Naruto's hand was a new sword that seemed to radiate power. The blade that had once been white was now entirely black, and that black seemed to pulse steadily. A red mist was wrapping around the blade and slowly stretched up the blade, just a thin mist that reminded Naruto of a snake that wrapped around the blade, but what surprised Naruto was that the red mist was slowly moving, continuously wrapping around the blade, swirling around as though it were a living being. The blade was slender and still very light. The blade was 3 feet long, the hilt was about 5 inches long, just long enough for Naruto to grip it with one hand and if necessary move his hand upward and grip the handle with two hands. The hilt itself was entirely black like the sword, but the only difference was that there seemed to be white lightning racing across the hilt. Naruto started at the hilt until he noticed the guard on the blade. It reminded him of a shuriken, but then he realized what it was. Two black lightning bolts that were diagonal. They had the same zigzags as lightning bolts that people drew and everything. Stretching from the hilt was a slender chain that was about 2 feet long, and Naruto noticed that on the end of the chain was a small ring that was big enough to fit his hand in but small enough not to be a problem in battle. Naruto grinned as he held his new sword in front of him and shook his head. The red mist began to slowly seep back down towards the hilt of the sword, and Naruto watched as the red mist gathered into the two lightning bolts, turning them entirely red. That was when the sword turned into a large cloud that began to swirl wildly around his hand until it continued up his right arm. Naruto started to panic as the cloud began to thunder and small sparks began to shoot from the cloud. He felt dampness in the cloud and he watched with amazement as the cloud began to swirl around his arm wildly. He felt only a cool and tingly sensation as the cloud began to shrink and shrink until it was only a small tattoo of weird markings that Naruto couldn't read. The markings had wrapped around his wrist like a bracelet, and then from there they had moved into the palm of his hand, where he found them all focused into a perfect circle. In the middle of the weird markings was a single kanji for Arashi, and Naruto realized that inside the seal was his new sword. Naruto stood there in disbelief. So much had happened in 7 days. He had learned much about himself. He had fought against a demon. He had killed several huge bosses on his journey. He had denied a power that most people would die for, and he also received a power that almost no one was worthy to receive. But now it's over. He whispered and closed his eyes. And it's time to go home. My family is waiting for me, he said as she opened his eyes. In front of him was a blue portal that seemed to spark as the outsides of it were dark blue and the inside was a light blue that swirled. Naruto held his right hand up and looked at the seal once more, looked down at his stomach where the Kyuubi's seal was finally showing again, and then to his left arm where his tattoo of the Uzumaki swirl within a moon shone vibrantly. Yeah, it's time to go home, Naruto said with a smile as he took a step forward. The blonde boy had done it. He had beaten the curse of the Uzumakis. In fact, he had destroyed it completely. He ended the cycle that people had to suffer from. I can truly accept my title as heir of the Uzumaki, Naruto said with a proud voice as he stepped into the portal. The realm he was in disappeared as everything he saw turned black. XXXXX. The first thing he felt was a sticky substance under his body, pooled out. The second thing he felt was a sharp pain in his stomach, signaling that he was hungry. The third thing he felt was a sudden wave of fatigue. Nonetheless, Naruto opened his eyes, his real eyes, and when he did he found himself staring at a gray ceiling. It was plain, nothing special about it, and so Naruto dismissed it. The blonde slowly pulled himself from the floor, but he couldn't move at all. His muscles were stiff from laying there for 7 days. Naruto groaned lightly as he began to slowly rock his body, slowly loosening all of his muscles. It took him a little bit, but soon he was able to move his joints even though they were still slightly stiff from lack of use. Naruto slowly pushed himself to his feet and felt the sticky substance peel off his back. He turned and looked down to find a black ink on the ground. At first he was confused until he looked around and took in a sharp intake of breath. He was in a small room that was about 10x10, the entire ground was covered with a large black seal and he lay in the middle of the seal, a large circle around him along with several kanji. The walls were also covered with seals and he was amazed that the ceiling was the only thing left out. Naruto groaned as he sat up completely straight and found his vision suddenly blocked. He panicked for a second until he saw sun-kissed hair in front of his eyes. He was in shock as he brought a stiff hand up to gently push his hair out of his eyes. He grabbed some of his hair and traced his fingers down it, shocked when he found that his blonde spiky hair now reached down past his eyes, concealing them from sight, the last strands ending just under his eyes. Naruto brushed the hair away so that it created some areas that he could see through, and he continued to feel his hair, seeing just how long it was. What the hell? Did being around she change my body? He wondered as he found that his hair was still unnaturally spiky, but the spikes had grown longer and drooped down somewhat like the Yondaime Hokage's had, the only difference being that nothing was on Naruto's head to stop his bangs from blocking his vision. He sighed as he stopped messing with his hair. He had other things to tend to, like getting out of the room. The boy slowly, and with a sharp intake of pain, stood to his feet. Before he attempted to walk, he began to stretch his cramped joints and almost moaned as he felt them getting looser. As he stretched from side to side, finishing his quick stretch routine, he turned to the door. It was large and was entirely made of steel. What interested Naruto was the fact that the seals that were on the door were very detailed, and it seemed as though they were made to suppress chakra, and that was when it hit him. He was locked in a room in case he had lost and she had gained control of his body. Naruto nodded in understanding before he walked up to the door. He wouldn't be able to just blast it away, since it was very likely the security seals would activate and identify him as an enemy and most likely annihilate him. Naruto looked around before he finally saw it. In the corner of the door was a small seal with the kanji for victory. He smirked when he realized that whoever made the seals made it possible for him to get out but impossible for she to get out. She wouldn't have noticed the seal that would allow him to unlock the prison, since he wouldn't be looking for it, but Naruto had seen it. He knew there had to be some way out. He reached up and, without really thinking about it, bit his thumb as though knowing it was a blood seal, and pressed it against the seal, which glowed red, before he heard a bunch of locks clicking inside the door. Naruto stood there impatiently as the door unlocked itself. Whoever had made it was very careful about making sure no one would break out, specifically she. Naruto let a low growl escape his throat, but as soon as sound escaped it, he began coughing. What the hell? He thought. His throat was parched as dry as sand. Whwa. He managed to croak out before he began coughing violently again. Well, that's out of the picture until I get water. Naruto thought. Just as he finished the thought, the door clicked one last time before he watched it slowly swing open, and he stepped out of the room only to step into a long chamber with only one way to go. Straight. XXXXX. Naruto walked along the chamber. He had been walking for what seemed like ages now, and it didn't help that he had to stop to catch his breath every 15 minutes. Man, only 7 days, and the mental strain really messed up my body. Maybe it was when I was beaten. Maybe the damage was sent to my body just like I assumed. Naruto thought as he kept walking, until suddenly he found himself standing before a flight of stairs. Fuck. I'm so sick of stairs. Naruto screamed mentally as he began to walk up the flight of steps. Surprisingly, the steps didn't take long to scale. There was only 40 of them. Naruto finally came to a landing, and on that landing were large wooden doors. He stared at them before shrugging. He expected some sort of defense yet again, but he figured that if she had escaped the prison it wouldn't really matter. Even if the door here was somehow defended, it wouldn't stop the demon. Naruto placed his hands firmly against the doors and pushed them open slowly until a cool blast of fresh air hit him in the face, and he greedily gulped it down. I'm free. Naruto thought as he stepped into the open with a large grin on his face. He spread his arms wide and was about to cry out when his surroundings became somewhat familiar. All around him was water, and that water was swirling with numerous whirlpools that churned dangerously enough that Naruto didn't feel like chancing a walk over them. He looked around and found that he was standing on what seemed to be a large rock. A small landing had been carved into it so that the door could be placed and the chamber undoubtedly built. Water. Naruto managed to rasp out before he bent over, the water somewhat calm against the rock he was on. The ledge had been made so that the sea was only a few inches below the rock, meaning that it was easy for Naruto to gather some of the water in his hands. Zabuza-sensei said that it was okay for ninja to drink salt water, but only if necessary. Our chakra system would burn the salt away before it could affect us like normal civilians. Naruto remembered before drinking the water and feeling it wet his dry throat. After the first drink he took a few more handfuls, appreciating that liquid making his throat feel better. That's much better. Naruto managed to say as he felt his voice come out in a rasp. Fuck, it still hurts to talk. He muttered before he stood up and looked around. It was daytime out, the sun high in the sky and beating down on him lightly. Naruto finally looked down and found that he was wearing a pair of black shorts and a black t-shirt. He must have been dressed before being sealed. He then, slowly, brought his right hand up. He half expected the seal to be gone, a simple dream, but he felt a grin tug at his face when he found the seal still the same way it had been before his soul returned to his body. Naruto clenched his hand tightly before closing his eyes and looking up towards the sun. I did it. He whispered to the wind. Suiten, Suiari Udan no Jutsu. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as a large water dragon rose before him, threatening to crash down while behind it stood 13 ninja. The whirlpools beneath them calmed until they had disappeared. Naruto! A voice called out and Naruto recognized it. He took a step forward, hesitantly, before he took another, closer to the ledge. Before he could try to step on the water, a large hail of ice senbon pierced the ground in front of him and Naruto looked up from the weapons and looked at all of the ninja and spotted one figure standing calmly at the front with another man. Naruto felt his lips twinge into a smile and he raised his left hand into the air. Hey! He shouted, but it was very hoarse and he sighed before waving his hand vigorously. He watched as the ninja hesitantly drew closer until they were all visible. Naruto felt his breath catch when he saw them. Zabuza and Haku leading 11 other ninja, some of who he knew. Gaara, which surprised him. Oka, which made him tense up before he relaxed a little bit. Other than those two, he didn't recognize any of the ninja before him. Naruto watched as Zabuza held up a hand and signaled for everyone to stop. They responded quickly and Zabuza continued walking forward slowly, his sword drawn and held in a ready position. Naruto watched as he drew closer before he was only 10 feet away. Naruto? Is it you? Zabuza asked hesitantly. Naruto eyed him carefully, his face blank. Who the hell else would it be? The Tsuchikage? Naruto asked with a sarcastic tone as he began to grin slowly. Zabuza sighed before a smile crossed his face, seen through his bandages that he wore. The man strapped his giant sword on his back before taking a hesitant step forward before he ran forward and before Naruto could react, the demon of the mist hugged his nephew. Thank God, Naruto. I thought you'd never wake up, we've been worried, brat. Zabuza said as he pulled away from the blonde. Naruto looked at him with a look of disbelief. What the hell? I've been gone for 7 days, why such a big fuss? Naruto asked as a grin crossed his face. He looked at Zabuza, who was staring at him sadly, and shook his head. Naruto, you have been locked in that cell and unconscious for a while. Zabuza muttered and Naruto shrugged, his grin still on his face. How long? Feels like I haven't eaten in years. The boy exclaimed and Zabuza eyed him carefully. Naruto, you've been gone for a year. The grin fell from Naruto's face immediately. Shit. End. Chapter 1, The Traitor, The Cage, and Weakness. Rise of Uzumaki. Didn't have to wait too long for this book. As you can see, I named it Rise of Uzumaki. Other than that, I have gotten a few PMs and also reviews asking about Sasuke and what has happened in the year Naruto has been gone. Fear not, for most of your answers shall be put to rest in the first few chapters. Also, don't complain about the things I'm going to reveal in this chapter. Think of it as purging and really seeing my story become realistic. Konoha, Hokage Tower. 11:08 p.m. Hokage-sama. The signal name rang loud and clear. It was a voice that seemed to only deliver bad news. Not once had he ever heard his name called out with such urgency only to have the news following it be pleasant. Never had he heard Hokage-sama. You may take the day off, there is no paperwork today, Orochimaru has turned himself in, we have found the fountain of eternal youth. It was never anything he wished to hear and this time didn't have any exception. As Sarutobi finished his mental thoughts and let out a grief and exhausted-filled sigh, he saw his door thrown open by the man who had yelled his name. Yes, what is it? The old Hokage asked tiredly, rubbing his temples in anticipation. Whatever had happened now would surely cause him mental stress. He was already working on quelling the headache that his head was slowly giving birth to. The man stood panting slightly, his hands on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. How he can sprint as far as he does, shout my name, and kick my door open yet not have enough energy to simply tell me what the commotion is about is beyond me. The Hokage thought as he watched the man with slight irritation, but he didn't let the emotion show on his face. Uchiha Sasuke. The man panted out as he slowly stood up straight, the panting slowly subsiding, allowing the man to speak. The Hokage sighed in frustration, his mind automatically went into what he had dubbed anti-Uchiha mode. He had developed the ill-harbored feelings after Uchiha Sasuke's trial along with the small civil war that had taken place in the Konoha Council chambers. Even after Sasuke's punishment was given to him, Even after he told the council numerous times, even after he had repeatedly reminded them of the boy's charges and the events that had taken place due to his actions, the council still tried, faithfully, every week to get the Uchiha a clean card. What about the Uchiha? If this is another attempt by the council to get the boy out of prison, so help me. The Hokage muttered as he folded his hands in front of his chest. The man shook his head, a quick jerk from side to side that looked as though it should have broken his neck. No, Hokage-sama. Orochimaru's forces attacked the maximum underground security and have taken Uchiha Sasuke. The man shouted and the Hokage froze, his hands clenching together tightly, and as a result his knuckles turned ghostly white. He didn't stare at the man in front of him, rather his eyes just were focused on him. His mind was running faster than he would be able to in his prime. Orochimaru, how did you learn about that establishment? It has been kept in utmost secret. The Hokage thought as he ran through all of the people who knew of the prison where Konoha's most dangerous enemies were sent. Homura, Koharu, Minato, Jiraiya, Ibiki, Anko, Irika, Kakashi, Hayashi, Shikaku, Inoichi, myself and... The Hokage snapped back to reality as he looked at the man in front of him, a cold seriousness crossed his face. I want teams 8, 9, 10, and 11 here now. The Hokage snapped and the man nodded before dashing out of the room. The Hokage quickly stood to his feet and slammed his hands down onto the desk. His eyes were set in a cold gaze as he ran through what needed to be done. Hokage-sama. A voice said, announcing its arrival into the room. Sarutobi looked up and found himself staring at Numbu, who was kneeling on the floor. The man's head was bowed, his face covered by his mask. The Hokage grunted with distaste. Now is not the time for that. What do you have to report? The old man demanded, and the Umbu stood to his feet quickly and began to give the Hokage the details of what had happened. 5 ninja infiltrated the prison and began to tear through our forces. They were powerful, something we have never seen before. Orochimaru was nowhere to be seen, but the leader of the invasion was Yakushi Kabuto. We think that Orochimaru gave him the location of the prison, but we don't know how he knew of where it was. Other than that, we have need of medical units. We suffered several losses but a few injuries. The Umbu said, giving the man a quick and short report, only saying what was important at the time. Also, the Uchiha went with them willingly, but we don't know where they are heading. They headed towards Konoha, but for what reason I do not know. The Hokage sat down in his chair, his eyes hard and calculating. What would Orochimaru's men be doing by bringing Sasuke back to Konoha, where the ninja populace would quickly intercept them and destroy the boy? The Hokage clenched his fists yet again, feeling a burning in his palms as his nails cut into his flesh, drawing his own blood. Before he could ponder the thoughts anymore, the doors flew open and teams 8 and 9 immediately arrived, worried looks on some of their faces while tired looks were on others. Hokage-sama? Why have you called us this late at night? Rock Lee asked as he yawned, rubbing his right eye with the back of his right hand. I have a mission for teams 8, 9, 10, and 11. Wait until teams 10 and 11 arrive and then I will give you more information. The Hokage announced in a commanding tone. His eyes were looking over the genin in front of him. Inyazuka Kiba was wide awake, his eyes glancing around nervously, while Akamaru, who was lying at his feet due to the fact that the dog no longer was small enough to rest atop the teen's head, let his brown eyes stare at the village leader. Hyuga Hinata was nervously clenching the hem of her coat tightly, her head was tilted forward as she muttered quietly to herself, mumbles that were incoherent and, at this point, useless to the Hokage. Team 8's final member Shino stood stock still, not showing any emotion nor talking much, just like others of his clan. The Hokage was about to let his eyes travel to the next person when his eyes opened in quick surprise before becoming serious again. There was the slightest trail of drool making its way out of Shino's mouth, and the Hokage could hear a steady snore, soft and nearly unhearable, coming from the boy. Surprising, I may have to watch his father at future clan meetings to see if his son is following in his footsteps. The Hokage thought mentally as his gaze traveled to the next person. Hyuga was standing just as stoic as his uncle did, nothing but seriousness written across his face. He was watching the Hokage with his pale milky white eyes, no doubt trying to figure out what kind of mission would require the presence of every genin team in rotation and on duty at that time. Rock Lee, like Shino, was sleeping on his feet, but it was much more obvious since he had a large snot bubble, that inflated as he breathed out and deflated when he breathed in, hanging from his nose. He was swaying slightly and the Hokage raised an eyebrow, giving the boy a look of disgusted amusement. Next to Lee was his teammate Tenten and she was slightly tired but like her teammate Niji was at attention. She was looking at everyone curiously to figure out what was going on. The Hokage nodded, happy that each looked ready to move out already. He wouldn't have to worry about them having to waste time and go back to their houses in order to prepare themselves for the sudden mission. As he finished observing the genin, the door opened again and in stumbled a tired Shikamaru and Koji, both supporting each other as they walked. Behind them was Sakura, who was looking around in shock at everyone in the room. Behind her were her two new teammates that she had received shortly after Sasuke had been sentenced to prison and Naruto was, against his own will, declared a missing nin. Her first teammate was one that had many conflicts with her in the beginning, but the two surprisingly began to get along after a few weeks, and now Ino and Sakura could be found walking around with none other than Ami, Sakura's past tormentor. The girl was just as shocked as Sakura was and her mouth was slightly opened, mumbling something to the final teammate of Team 11. Yameji Hiro, a quiet boy who didn't really stand out among others but was strong. Not as strong as some of the original Konoha 12 but strong enough to defend himself when challenged to a spar. The boy was the original member of Team 11, and the last surviving member. His teammates and his sensei had been killed in the invasion, and it was then that the boy had become silent and unresponsive. Nothing as bad as Sasuke is, but since being paired with Sakura and Ami the boy had began to open up more. Hokage-sama? What do you need from us? Sakura asked as every genin lined up, 2 rows of 6 and 5, teams 8 and 10 in the back and teams 9 and 11 in the front. The pink-haired girl stared at the Hokage curiously, but the old man held up a hand and looked over at Shikamaru and Koji. Where is Ino? Did you guys not inform her of my sudden calling? He asked, and Shikamaru shrugged and turned towards the door. She was with me when we got Koji, but then she suddenly remembered that she needed something and ran home. She should be here sooner or later. The Nara said as he cast a quick and worried glance towards the door. The Hokage nodded before he returned to the matter at hand. Most of the genin had come and Ino would be filled in on the matters later when she met up with her teammates. From what I believe to be a couple hours ago, Orochimaru's forces infiltrated Konoha's maximum underground prison. The Hokage said, and the genin stared at him, confusion written all over their faces. You wouldn't know, it is a village secret. The man said, and he saw many nods. The object of the infiltration was to capture Uchiha Sasuke, which wasn't hard. Sasuke has gone with Orochimaru's forces, and I can only guess that he believes to travel back with them. I want all of you to pursue them and be warned. The infiltration team consisted of 5 members including Yakushi Kabuto. Last we saw, Sasuke and the team were moving towards Konoha for some unknown reason. The Hokage said, and the genin nodded. Hokage-sama, why would they head towards the area that Sasuke is wanted? Sakura asked curiously, and the Hokage heard several others mutter in agreement and disbelief. The Hokage was going to speak, but the genius in the room spoke. He wants power. Shikamaru muttered and stepped forward and eyed the Hokage seriously. How didn't you figure it out yet? The boy exclaimed and gestured out the window and into the distance. He wants to revive his clan, but how would he do that if he had no documents on them? How would he learn his family techniques and different styles if he didn't have their records, their scrolls, anything? Shikamaru said, and the Hokage cursed as he stood to his feet in anger. Curse my blindness, how did I not see that they would return for those things? I knew they should have been removed. I want all of you to surround the Uchiha compound. If anyone tries to enter, attack and capture them. Sasuke has restraint seals on him and his Sharingan has been sealed, so don't worry about it. The Hokage shouted, and the genin teams quickly dashed from the room, heading towards the most depressing place in the village, the place that an entire clan was wiped out in a night, the Uchiha compound. XXXXX. Konoha, Uchiha compound. 11:30 p.m. I smell blood. Kiba whispered as they all drew closer. As soon as the words left his lips, Hinata and Niji both activated their Byakugans and searched the area before them carefully, making sure they weren't walking into a trap. Oh no! Hinata whispered as her body began to tremble slightly. Pick up the pace. Niji shouted as he sent a burst of chakra racing through his legs, causing him to fly forward. Shikamaru was by him in an instant, a serious look set on his normally bored and lazy face. "What is it, Niji?" the boy asked in concern as they drew ever closer to the compound. "It's Ino," the boy muttered, and Shikamaru froze on the pole he was standing on while the other ninja passed him in blurs. Koji landed next to him and grabbed his shoulder. "Come on, we have to hurry," the chubby teen shouted in fear as he pulled Shikamaru behind him. While the two members of Team 10 started to catch up, the other ninjas landed in front of the compound, and after they got a signal from Niji they dashed in, Sakura in the lead as her head wiped back and forth, trying to find her best friend. As her eyes drifted, she found her. Ino was lying in the middle of the street, her clothes torn and bloody, and a small pool of blood around her. "Ino!" Sakura cried out in fear and grief as she dashed forward and fell to her knees, sliding up to the girl who was sprawled on the ground. The other ninjas hung back slightly while they watched Sakura rest by Ino's side. Shikamaru and Koji landed behind them and didn't waste time being nice and pushed through them all. "What's wrong with her?" Shikamaru demanded as he knelt down by a shaking Sakura. His eyes drifted over Ino's beaten body and his eyes slowly widened with horror as things became clear to him. "No," he whispered. Ino's shirt was torn in several places, revealing her bandage that wrapped around her chest. A lot of the bandage was red, and in a few places it was torn, revealing creamy skin beneath that was marred with gashes. The girl's chest was slightly exposed, but no one noticed it really, it just registered subconsciously. "Ino, he didn't," Koji whispered in rage. The girl's skirt was gone. The bandage around her legs was torn and slightly bloodied. "He did," Sakura muttered as tears fell down her face. Shikamaru jumped to his feet with a loud cry and turned to Niji. "Niji! Lee! Kiba! Shino! Koji! Tenten! Hiro! Let's go!" Shikamaru cried as he took off. The genin he had called out didn't hesitate to follow him. They figured out what had happened just as easily as Sakura, Shikamaru, and Koji had. While they all ran off, Hinata and Ami ran forward towards Sakura, whose shoulders were shaking slightly as she cried. "Is she alive?" Ami demanded, and Sakura weakly nodded her head. "We have to get her to the hospital," she shouted, but Sakura was unresponsive. Ami growled and took a step forward and grabbed the pink-haired girl's shoulder and turned her around. The girl's tear-streaked face looked at her under the moonlight. Smack! Sakura was knocked out of her shock. Her right hand shot up and touched her cheek that now stung after Ami's slap. The pink-haired girl stared at her teammate in disbelief before she understood. It would do her no good to sit here and cry over what had been done. She had to save her best friend before she died. The pink-haired girl stood to her feet and acted quickly. "Hinata, I need your coat," she shouted, and the Hyuga hesitated for a second before slipping the coat off. She stood with a tight black shirt on, fishnet around the collar, and it showed off her form, but neither of the other girls present cared much. Sakura snatched the coat and laid it on the still form of Ino, covering her body. "Ami, grab her legs, but be careful," Sakura ordered, and the purple-haired girl nodded and slowly bent down and pushed Ino's legs, which were slightly spread, together. Sakura grabbed the girl's shoulders and gently began to lift her while Mai did the same with her feet. "Hinata, brace her back," Sakura said, and Hinata nodded. After getting situated, the girls quickly began to move towards the Konoha hospital, hoping and praying that they got there in time. XXXXX. Uzugakure, Uzu Gates. 3:47 p.m., prior to Konoha incident and 3 hours from when Naruto awoke. "Whoa!" Naruto whispered in awe as he stood before the gates of Uzugakure. The city lay before him. The blonde didn't move, didn't speak anymore. Instead, he just let his eyes wander over the city that lay before him, and he did so in awe. The last time he had been there, the entire city had been a sight that was full of destroyed houses, broken cement blocks littered the ground, and there was large heaping piles of rubble. The ground was barren and depressing, it yielded no life, no vegetation, and not many animals could be found. The blonde no longer saw any of those things. Granted, he didn't see a huge looming village like Konoha or Kumo. What he saw was a small village that had the potential to grow much larger. The first thing he noticed was that all of the destroyed houses, all of the rubble and left behind debris was gone. The ground was clean, and when he noticed this, he noticed another thing: sand. Soft white sand covered the entire ground that Uzumaki was on. Naruto turned towards Gaara, who was staring at him with a blank look. "I'm guessing that you had a part in the sand?" he asked, and the red-headed boy nodded slowly, and Naruto chuckled lightly before returning his gaze upon the village. There were several houses that were about 2 stories tall, and there were others that were only a story tall. Naruto began walking forward, ignoring the ninja that were behind him. As he walked through the large gate that loomed over him, he allowed a small smile to cross his face. The gate was much like Konoha's, a large arch, only this gate was black and seemed to shine slightly, and as he looked closer he found that it was made from some type of black rock. "How did you guys make that?" he asked quietly, and it was Zabuza who answered his question. "Doton users, we have a couple here and they worked hard on this," the man said as he took a few strides forward so that he stood next to Naruto. "After we placed you inside the chamber, Gaara, Oke, Haku, and myself all returned to the island. We began to process of cleaning up, and while those 3 worked I traveled around and gathered together old friends and looked for a few people who would be willing to help us, people who wanted a new life," Zabuza said, and turned towards the 12 ninja trailing behind them. "These are some of the people who decided to join, they are our strongest ninja," Zabuza said, and Naruto nodded before returning his gaze to the village. "How big is the village so far?" Naruto asked, and Zabuza scratched his chin as he tried to think of how big the village was. "I'd say that the island is 25 miles long and 15 miles wide, with a few smaller islands surrounding it. Now when the village is done it will hopefully be a bit smaller than Konoha, but as of now, it may be the size of the village in Wave Country. It isn't huge since we haven't had many people to utilize and have us help build," Zabuza muttered and turned his head, his eyes roaming over the ninja behind him. "Genji, come here," Zabuza called out to a man, and said man ran forward, stopping next to Zabuza and staring at the man with a confused expression. "What is it, Zabuza-sama?" the man known as Genji asked. Naruto looked the man over and saw that he was wearing black pants that were tied around his knees and also around his ankles with white tape. He wore a blue ninja vest over a black mesh shirt and on his hip with a small saber. His kunai holster was on his left leg and his shuriken holster was on his right. The man was slightly shorter than Zabuza, who already stood at 6 feet 3 inches, and he had soft brown hair that hung down low so that it slightly covered his brown eyes. He also had a scar on his cheek that stretched from the corner of his eye downwards, ending in the middle of his cheek. "First, don't call me Sama," Zabuza said in his gruff voice before continuing, seeing a small smirk appear on Naruto's face. "This is Naruto, my nephew," Zabuza said, and Genji turned to Naruto and held out a hand, reaching in front of Zabuza, which slightly irked the man. "Hey there, nice to finally meet the heir," Genji said cheerfully, and Naruto smiled slightly and took the man's hand in his own and shook it. "Naruto, this is Genji, he used to be a Kirinin but he defected a while after I did. He used to be a Jonin, even though I don't agree," Zabuza muttered, and Genji rolled his eyes at the statement. "Anyways, he is one of our Doton users, it's his natural affinity and so he is able to utilize it better than others. As a matter of fact, we don't let people even work with the rock structures unless they have an affinity for earth," Zabuza muttered and returned to what he was saying. "Anyways, Genji is our construction guy, he coordinates what needs to be built. That is what he has been doing for the last few years, besides collecting bounties," Zabuza said with a small chuckle. "Hey, both jobs paid good money. Besides, if I hadn't been collecting bounties I wouldn't have run into you," Genji said with a small grin before looking at Naruto. "This guy found me a few days after I had set off to collect his bounty. It took some time but he convinced me that I would be happier here. No one knows about this place quite yet, so all of us have been safe from hunter nins or enemies," Genji said, and Naruto nodded. "Good, that'll make it easier for us to get our act together," Naruto said, and turned to Zabuza, who was waiting for the two to finish their little conversation. "Are you waiting for something?" Naruto asked in a smart tone and was forced to duck under a swat aimed at his head. He ducked to slow though and felt Zabuza's hand hit the top back of his head. "Ow! You big jerk!" Naruto grumbled. "Shut it, brat. Now, like I was going to ask, Genji, approximately what structures do we have built and how many of each do we have?" the man asked, and Genji tapped his chin as he pushed his lips out as he thought about everything. Well, we have built 34 two-story houses and they are all complete, 21 one-story houses. We restored 4 of the clan manors and have yet to restore the other 5 that have somewhat survived abandonment. We finished the archway there and are working on plans to start building the surrounding gate that will help guard our village. We have 15 one-story houses under construction and 17 two-story houses under construction. We have finished building the prison just a couple days ago along with the village council chamber and also. Genji said and grinned. We just put the finishing touches on the Uzumaki tower yesterday. Genji said and Naruto stared at him in disbelief. How the hell did he remember all of those things? The blonde wondered in amazement. He shook his head and looked at the village, his village. Naruto felt a small grin appear on his face as he made the realization. So giving me a rough estimate, how long until we can really establish ourselves? Naruto asked and Zabuza snorted. We haven't made much progress in this last year on making our village a real village. It'll be a little while until we can establish ourselves as one of the great villages, but we can surely become strong now that you have woken up. Zabuza said and Naruto nodded hesitantly. Yeah, now that I'm awake. XXXXX. Uzu, Council Chambers. 4:05 p.m. Okay, we can finally get down to discussing things. Zabuza said as he settled himself in a chair. They all sat around a large circular table that seated everyone in the room, all 10 of them. The table was meant to seat many more, but that wasn't a concern because there wasn't a real need to seat 24 people at the moment. Zabuza stood to his feet and pointed at Genji. You know Genji? He said and Naruto chuckled as Zabuza pointed a woman who sat next in the circle and from there he went around until he ended on himself. That is Uzumaki Taka, she is our cousin. Zabuza said and Naruto stiffened upwards but Zabuza held up a finger. No. No questions like that until we are done here, we can get to know each other's side stories later. Next is that depressing guy there. Zabuza said pointing at a boy who looked rather cheery and wasn't sitting in a chair. Instead he was crouching on the table looking around at everyone. He had small smirk on his face and his green eyes were a very light color, almost looking slightly creamy. He had black hair that hung down to his shoulders but was cut wildly making it look cool and untamed. His bangs hung down in front of his eyes but were brushed off to the sides. He wore a tight black coat that had a hood on the back with heavy white fur around the edge. The coat sleeves cut off slightly before his wrists but instead of bare hands he wore gloves that most likely covered a lot of his arm but he only showed a bit of it. The gloves stretched up his entire hand past his knuckles and up to the first joint of his fingers. He had a ring, with a large metal skull on them, on each of his middle fingers. The coat cut off a bit before his hips and it was zipped up all the way but under the coat he wore a tight black shirt. For pants he wore a pair of black tight pants that were slightly baggy but otherwise were tight. He had metal studs stretched around his thighs and he wore a pair of black ninja sandals. I'm not depressing. The boy said and laughed. I just don't dress vibrantly, I'm used to laying low. He said and Zabuza shook his head. That is Ryu, little brat still won't tell me his clan name though. I found him wandering through the forests one day and after the brat attacked me I convinced him that he should join our village. He was a Chunin back in Kumo. Zabuza said and moved on to the next person, leaving Ryu to smile at Naruto. Zabuza pointed at another man who was rather old and had a white scruffy beard around his jaw and mouth. His hair was white and short, his eyes were gray and radiated wisdom. The name's Shigo, Omori Shigo. Better not forget it you twerp. Shigo said in a heavy voice and glared at Naruto. The blonde stared at him cautiously, his hands clenched under the table. The man looked strong. He wore a gray open-collar shirt that revealed that he had some muscle and leaning against his chair was a good-sized club, a club that had 4 steel spikes on one side. That guy looks crazy. Naruto thought mentally as he looked at Zabuza who was staring at him with a small smirk on his face. Scared? The man asked and Naruto scoffed at him. That was my instructor when I first became a genin. Naruto's gaze drifted from Zabuza back to Shigo who was staring at him sternly. I'll teach you yet. Won't be a little smart ass when I'm done with you. You'll be a real ninja. Shigo bellowed and crossed his arms. Naruto just nodded his head while Zabuza chuckled and moved on to the next person who happened to be a woman that looked to be around the same age as Zabuza. That right there is Azora Hana, she is from Taki, A genjutsu specialist, but she still has the rank of chunin. Zabuza said, and Hana nodded at Naruto, who gave her a small smile and nod of recognition as Zabuza continued. You know, okay, Gaara, yourself, Haku, and then me, Zabuza. Zabuza said, finishing his introductions. Now, down to business. What happened? He asked, and Naruto stared at him in shock. What? Naruto asked, and everyone continued to stare at him. No. I will ask the questions and then I'll tell you of my 7 days in hell. Naruto said as he crossed his arms, his voice growing serious. His playful mood could only last before so long before he brought out his serious side, and right now he wanted answers. Little brat. Shigo muttered as he glared at Naruto. The old man flexed his muscles as though trying to intimidate the blonde, but it didn't work as effectively as he would have hoped. You don't like it, old man? Then get out of here. Naruto said as he shrugged. I don't feel like reliving all of the things I went through, sorry if it's kind of painful. Naruto said, looking at Zabuza, his eyes finally showing something that Zabuza had known he would see for a year. In the normally cheerful blue eyes was accusing. Naruto's eyes bore into Zabuza, speaking the words before they ever left the blonde's mouth. Why didn't you tell me? He demanded, and Zabuza sighed. The man leaned forward and rested his chin on his right hand, which he brought up from his lap. He looked around the room before his eyes settled on his nephew. I didn't think it would happen so soon. I thought it would happen well after the chunin exams. I was going to tell you. Zabuza muttered, and Naruto shook his head and slammed his hands down on the table, a look of anger crossing his face. Do you know what I went through? He almost yelled, making some of the room's occupants tense up. I had to face some of my deepest memories and some crazed demon that was hell-bent on beating me and taking over my body. Don't you think you should tell me about that? Naruto hissed as he pulled his hands off the table and crossed his arms angrily, slamming the limbs against his body as he looked around. Why is he here? Naruto demanded and looked at Oki. Hey! Don't give me that look, asshole! Oki yelled as Naruto glared at him. The Kusa boy clenched his fists together as Naruto continued to glare at him. I got dragged here by Sandy Locks. It took a couple of months, but I warmed up to this place. But what really sealed the deal was when you remembered that I was going to kick your ass for attacking my village when I woke up. Naruto spit out, and Oka stared at him before the boy burst out laughing at something that Naruto didn't understand. The blonde stared at the blue-haired boy, waiting for the laughter to stop, waiting to be let in on the joke. Naruto let his gaze briefly flicker over the other people in the room and saw many others looking at him with hidden feelings, and that was when Naruto sensed something wasn't right. He had a gut instinct. What happened? He asked, and Zabuza shook his head. The blonde stared at him in shock. Was Konoha destroyed? The blonde whispered, and Zabuza snorted. Konoha? Destroyed? Yeah, right, damn village is still there with all their worthless ninja. Zabuza said in disgust and reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small book and threw it across the table. The book suddenly opened to a page as it slid in front of Naruto. The blonde looked around before his eyes looked down at the page of the book, and that was when his heart almost shattered. Uzumaki Naruto. Age at time of defection 13. Hair, blonde. Eyes, blue. Height, 5 feet 6 inches. Affinities, Sutin. Special techniques, Cage Bunshin, Summoning, Foxes, Raise Non. Rank, Genin. Special status, Holder of Kyubi no Kitsune, Large amount of chakra, High stamina, Fast regeneration. Bingo book rank, B. Naruto slowly closed the book, his eyes becoming softer as he realized what that meant. He shut the book tightly and held onto it for a little bit before he looked at Oki. I'm sorry for yelling at you. He muttered, and with a jerk of his hand sent the book sliding back towards Zabuza. The man caught it easily with one hand before he slipped it back into his pocket and stared at Naruto. You have no ties to Konoha anymore, Naruto. Zabuza said, and Naruto nodded. Do you have any more questions? The man asked, and Naruto looked around. How big is our population? The blonde asked, and Zabuza shrugged and thought for a moment. I'd say we have about 100 people total, about 30 of them are ninja. We have 10 jonin, 15 chunin, and 5 genin. You, Gaara, Oki, Haku, and also another girl who we found running from Kumo. Zabuza said and Naruto nodded. So what is our plan of action? Naruto asked as he looked around. We need to gather more people, we need to expand our population. The blonde teen said and Zabuza nodded. Yeah, but we also have to make sure our village is strong enough to fend off any attempts to eradicate it. Sooner or later people will catch wind of this new village and no doubt so will our enemies and they will attack us. Zabuza said and Naruto nodded. My goal is to get a team together and sneak into Kiri and spread word to those who need to escape. As you know, the bloodline purge is still going on unfortunately, and I know that there are other Uzumaki hidden within Kirigakure. We need to get our family out along with anyone else who used to reside in Uzu. Zabuza said, and he heard a chorus of agreement from the older ninja present. We just have one huge problem with everything though. Zabuza said, and everyone looked at him. What's that? Ryu asked curiously, and Zabuza looked at him and then looked at Naruto, his hand coming up to point at the boy. Him? Ryu asked in shock. Yeah, Naruto is the heir, he will be our leader. It is his birthright. Zabuza said, and Naruto's eyes opened in shock. Then how is that a problem? The blonde shouted, a small amount of fear in his voice. Did Zabuza mean that he was an obstacle? That's what it was sounding like to the blonde boy. Because, unfortunately, when we sealed you away we activated all of the restraining seals. Zabuza muttered and Taka gasped. No. She whispered and Zabuza nodded. Naruto looked at the shocked woman and then at Zabuza. Wait, what's wrong with that? He asked, afraid of the answer. His blue eyes watched Zabuza carefully, waiting for a new surprise. When someone goes through the process you did, they have to be sealed away like that. Those seals you saw were special, they are meant to weaken the person inside over time. Zabuza said, and slowly things began to make sense to Naruto and others in the room. Usually it took people about 2 to 5 weeks to either die or live. When they lost, the seals had already absorbed enough of the person's energy, chakra, and also deteriorated enough muscle to make sure that the demon couldn't do much damage before it was dealt with. Zabuza said, and Naruto dropped his head. How long did it take for them to make a comeback? He whispered, he feared the worst, and Zabuza reluctantly spoke. About a month. The man said, and Naruto looked up shaking his head. Is that why you had to carry me across the sea? Naruto asked. When they were about to leave the island, Naruto had tried to step out onto the water in order to walk with Zabuza and Haku, but he found that he quickly fell into the water and he was finding it kind of hard to stay afloat. He had originally thought that it was just because he hadn't used his chakra or muscles in over a year and so he needed to get back in shape, but he didn't know that he was actually losing muscle and chakra over the year he was in the room. Yes, Naruto. You can't do anything, you have to start from scratch, but it's not all bad. Zabuza said, and Naruto laughed. It's not all bad. He said, raising his hands. An academy student could kick my ass. He said, and this earned laughter from everyone in the room. It even caused a small grin to appear on Naruto's face. No, you can finally learn the Uzumaki style, the true one. Zabuza said, and Naruto stared at him in disbelief. The man had just told him a new secret. How many fucking styles are there? Naruto asked in horror. He had already went through 7 months of training just to learn the regular and royal style, but now he just found out he would have to learn a new one. Zabuza chuckled slightly before he held up one finger. Hehe, one. The other 2 I taught you are both just basic styles that were used by Uzugakure Academy students. The man said with a slight grin which caused Naruto to let his shocked face melt into a look of anger. Settle down, there is something I need to tell you though, this will be a lot of information. Zabuza said as he stood to his feet. What is it? Naruto asked carefully, and the man shrugged. You know that the Uzumaki were the best seal users there were, right? Zabuza asked, and Naruto shook his head. Well, they were. Anyways, there is something special that we have. Zabuza began but was interrupted by Taka. You don't mean to make him go in there, do you? She demanded, and Zabuza nodded. In order to get him caught up to where he was, he must. Don't worry, I don't plan on making him stay in there long. Zabuza said, and Taka nodded cautiously. Naruto was watching them in interest. What was Zabuza talking about? What are you guys arguing about? He asked, and the man turned back towards him and began to speak slowly. Naruto, there are some things you must know. Things before we go on with what needs to be done. Zabuza said and waited for the blonde to nod. The man continued on, careful about what he was about to explain to Naruto. The Uzumaki built a special chamber and made very power space/time barrier seals on it. Remember how you thought you spent 7 days fighting your demon but a year really passed? Zabuza asked, and Naruto stared at him. Are you serious? I have to go through that again. Naruto shouted in anger and rejection. He didn't want to lose any more of his life pointlessly. No. It's different. A week in this chamber is the equivalent to a year. I want to bring you in here to train. There are things you have to learn. War is coming, and in order to lead our country you have to be strong. Zabuza said as he stared at Naruto sincerely. By us going into this chamber I can train you. Your muscles are almost gone, they have slowly deteriorated over the last year like I said. We need to get you in there so we can reverse the effects. The only downside is that we won't be able to work on jutsu at all. While in the chamber we can only focus on taijutsu, kenjutsu, conditioning, and chakra control. Zabuza said, and Naruto stared at him before the boy hesitantly nodded. Fine, only because I need to get stronger. Naruto said reluctantly. When do we start? He asked, and Zabuza smirked. Tonight. All we have to do is get you some training clothes and then we'll go to hell. Zabuza said as his eyes closed, an evil grin visible through the bandages on his face. Chapter 2, The Chamber. Rise of Uzugakur. Uzugakur, Hidden Chamber. 8:02 p.m. Whoa. Naruto muttered as they finally stopped in front of the chamber where he was to train. Zabuza stood next to him, the man's arms were crossed in front of his chest as he surveyed the large chamber in front of them. On his other side was Taka, her blue hair cascaded down, blocking her features almost entirely except for one half of her face where her right eye shone brightly, a crimson red that looked eerily like blood. Her hair reached her shoulders and had a dull sheen to it. All three of the Uzumaki wore the same training gear and on their backs were large backpacks. There were slight modifications to each training outfit, to suit the needs of its wearer. Zabuza's consisted of a pair of black pants that were wrapped at the bottom with white tape, and for a shirt he wore a tight muscle shirt. His giant sword was of course clamped onto his back like it always was. Naruto wore a pair of black pants identical to Zabuza's, taped and all, and instead of a muscle shirt for his shirt he wore a tight orange t-shirt that had a white strip down the front. His hair was covered by a black hat that fit snugly over his head, resting just above his eyes. His blonde hair stuck out around the edges. The hat itched the blonde horrendously, but Zabuza said that it would keep his hair out of his face for now, otherwise he could just shave it all off. Naruto had chosen the hat without protest after that. On his back he had on a sheath for a plain sword since no one had managed to find his sword back in Konoha. Naruto had decided that he wouldn't reveal his secrets just yet, secrets which included Ranjin and she being sealed within the sword. Taka stood next to him and she wore a pair of tight black pants that clung to her legs but allowed her freedom to move. For a shirt she wore a black tee and on her waist she had a short sword hanging uselessly. Naruto stared at the chamber, his eyes slowly moving over it, taking in all of its details. Lack of details is more like it, the blonde boy thought as he turned his gaze over towards his uncle, a look of questioning on his face. This is the great chamber you guys mentioned. Naruto said, bringing a single hand up and made a slow motion in front of him, gesturing to the chamber. It's a giant, flat wall, he exclaimed. The chamber was in fact, not a chamber. The trio of Uzumaki had journeyed a ways into the forest until they had come to a cave that descended far into the earth, a flight of steps that seemed to keep going. Now they stood before the chamber that was in a large room, about the size of the academy classroom. It was bare except for two torches that flickered in their brackets that were fastened to the wall on either side of a large steel door that had no handle. Instead it had a medium-sized red spiral in the center of it. Patience, you little brat. Zabuza grumbled as he stepped forward. He brought his hand up and placed it against the door firmly, his palm covering the red spiral. Naruto watched with curiosity as the door began to hum slightly before a small pulse of chakra made its way over the door and, slowly, the large door began to open up. At first a small crack had appeared in the middle of the doors, announcing it as not just a door but two halves of a door. Then slowly it slid apart until it receded into the wall, and was gone from sight. In its place was a single wall of white light. "Whoa, so we're going in there?" Naruto asked as he began to step forward, but before his foot could make contact with the ground he was jerked backwards. The boy cried out as he fell to the ground heavily, catching himself on his hands before he slowly sat up and saw Taka glaring at him furiously. "What the hell is your problem?" he demanded as he got to his feet and stormed up in front of her. He glared at her, staring at her single red eye, waiting for an answer. "Naruto, leave her alone." Zabuza grumbled, and the blonde waited for a few seconds before complying. "Bitch," Naruto muttered as he turned back to Zabuza. "When are we going in?" he asked, and Zabuza's only answer was to reach into his bag and pull out a scroll. "As soon as we fully equip you," the man said as threw the scroll on the ground, where it exploded in a cloud of smoke. Naruto watched as the smoke disappeared, leaving a pile of objects lying in its wake. "What the?" Naruto muttered as he stared at the items. "Weights, there are a few things we are going to work on in the chamber, your speed is one of them," Zabuza said, and started grabbing the weights. "Strap this to your forearms," he said, and threw 2 pairs of weights to Naruto. The blonde caught them and was thrown off balance suddenly, a look of shock crossing his face. The weights were heavy, almost too heavy for his muscle-deprived body to hold onto. "How much do these weigh?" he asked, his face twisted in shock and also from exerting effort to hold the weights. "Oh, you knows. 15 pounds each, but don't worry, after a few days in the chamber you'll be somewhat used to them," Zabuza said, and crossed his arms waiting for Naruto to strap the weights on. "Hurry up," the man barked, and Naruto nodded and set to work. "Now what?" "Legs weights." "Ah. 15 pound each also? XXXXX. You have to be kidding," Naruto muttered as he dragged his feet forward, trying to edge closer to the chamber. Zabuza looked at him, a small smirk on his face. The man was obviously enjoying Naruto's suffering. "I can barely move," Naruto grumbled loudly, and Zabuza shrugged before he began to speak. "We have to get you back to normal and then some. Before we get in there I want to tell you some very important things, we don't have time to waste in there," Zabuza said, and Naruto stared at him with an angered expression. "Aren't we going to be in there for the equivalent of a year or so?" the blonde almost yelled. "How can we not have time?" he hissed, and Zabuza sighed and rubbed his forehead. "This chamber is powerful, probably the most powerful thing known to man. It is comparable to, I don't know." "Just shut up and listen," Zabuza groaned, and Naruto set his mouth in a thin line, his eyes narrowed as he glared at his uncle. "Damn it. The chamber can be used for a long time, but if we use it for a year then it will seal itself after we leave for a year," Taka said quietly, but annoyance and anger laced her words. "That's why we don't have time to waste. Besides, there is something we have to do before we can even think about entering this chamber," Taka said, and looked at Zabuza, who was staring at Naruto with a blank face. "What?" Naruto muttered, and Zabuza looked at the chamber before speaking. "We are going to train you to be strong, but there is something preventing you from doing that," Zabuza said, and Naruto waited for him to finish. The blonde stared at his uncle in apprehension. "The Kyuubi, you have no chakra control because the seal that was placed on you allows the demon's chakra to be added to your own gradually, but the seal can't stop the random fluxes that flood our system. That is why you have no control. Your chakra frequency is always changing," Zabuza said, and Naruto stared at them for a little bit before laughing. "Tell me, how do you plan on fixing that?" "Releasing the Kyuubi?" Naruto asked and laughed, wiping a tear from his eye. "Yes," Taka said with a flat voice. "That's exactly what we plan to do." XXXXX. Konohagakure, Hospital. 7:34 a.m. "I'll kill him. I'll find the worthless shit and do what the council should have done a year ago." Inoichi bellowed as he gripped the wall next to him tightly, leaving finger indents along with cracks in the wall. His eyes were trained on his daughter, who was lying in a hospital bed, the blankets pulled up around her. She was hooked up to a few machines that took care of a few basic necessities such as food and water, and also a drip. She had bandages wrapped around her arms, legs, and stomach. Her face had a few gauze pads strapped to it and her breath was coming deeply. Inoichi. I know you are angered, but Koharu began to say, but the angered man wasn't going to listen. Instead he took a different approach, one that left everyone in the room staring at the blonde man and the gray-haired man in shock, one that left the elder pinned against the wall, a hand on his throat, ready to choke the life out of him. Inoichi didn't take the approach of a calm clan head, instead he took the approach of a pissed-off father, a father that knew his daughter had just been raped and the sick bastard who did it was still out there. You know I'm angered? Oh, it's beyond that. The blonde man said, hissing the words at the elder. He knew there would most likely be punishment, but right now, for one of the few moments in his life, his judgment was clouded by emotion. I don't know what I am right now because I'm so fucking pissed that I think I may have created a new emotion that would make the anger of a biju pale in comparison. Inoichi roared and pressed tighter against the gasping elder's throat. Inoichi. A concerned man said and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. He slightly pulled his friend, who ignored his touch for a few moments before he released the elder from his grasp, allowing the man to fall onto his ass and shuffle backwards before coming to a stand next to his opposite Homura. I know you're angry, I am too, but we must think rationally. Killing among ourselves will not solve our problems. Shikaku muttered as he let his eyes fall upon the elders. Then I suggest they leave before I express mail their souls to the god of their choice. No, scratch that, I'll sell their souls to the foulest demon that resides in the deepest pits of hell, and in return I'll ask for a flaming rod of spiked metal that I can shove up their asses and gain a sliver of satisfaction. They'll know what it's like to be raped. Inoichi said darkly as he slowly turned his back on the elders. We are here to discuss important matters. Homura said before the argument could escalate to a full-out battle within the small room. She looked at her colleague and dismissed his coughing into his sleeve. We have to consider our option right now. Capturing Sasuke is a priority. He must be put back under lock and key so that we can evaluate his mental condition. Homura said and was cut off from saying anything more when a low chuckle resounded from the windowsill. All eyes turned and found themselves looking at none other than the legendary Sunin Jiraiya. What is the meaning of your interruption, Jiraiya? Should you not be reporting to the Hokage? Homura asked in a flat tone, anger hidden well. Jiraiya looked around the room. Amusement, about what Homura had stated before he made his appearance, was apparent in his eyes. His glance moved over to the bedridden and comatose Ino. You say that Sasuke needs to be mentally evaluated? What better evaluation than looking at what the little brat has done? Jiraiya said and waved his hand at the elders. If he thinks it's just fine to kill and rape fellow shinobi, then you know something's not right in his pathetic head. If you don't like that argument, then how about this one? He ran off to go find Orochimaru. No, scratch that, he ran off with Orochimaru's elite guard and they brought him directly to Orochimaru. Jiraiya said with a dark scowl on his face. He still had no idea why his sensei kept the worthless advisors around, because the only advice that they gave was shit. We do not know at this time as Sasuke has joined Orochimaru. For all we know, he could be trying to infiltrate his walls and then gather information on him for us. Koharu said, his voice hoarse due to the fact that Inoichi nearly strangled him. Really? And part of his glorious mission was to rape a fellow comrade? Sounds like a great plan for a mentally unstable, traitorous and worthless bastard. He had the curse mark and we all know he is hell-bent on gaining power, so don't try to stick up in his defense. This village has lost its precious Uchiha. Jiraiya said and glanced at Ino sadly. And in the process we may have lost another gifted ninja. He muttered only for a select few to hear. That is exactly why we are here. Homura stated as she stepped forward and looked at the room's occupants with an air of authority as though she was in control of them all. Inoichi, Shikaku, Izumi who was Ino's mother, Sakura, Choza, Jiraiya, and finally a frightened nurse who was trapped in a corner, fearfully watching everything happening. Homura sniffed slightly before continuing. Sasuke did something horrible, but at the same time it may be a blessing. Ino, she could be pregnant with the boy's child. If she gives birth, then dash. Boom. I'll kill you both. Inoichi screamed as he dived out the doorway that he had thrown Homura's frail body through. Koharu was thrown to the side as the blond man shouldered past him, his attention solely focused on the woman who made such a retarded plan. His teeth were bared and his hands outstretched, prepared to strangle the woman, but when his hands were inches from her neck, inches from showing her what he thought about the plan, he found his movements halted. He snarled, but he knew it was no use. Shikaku had him trapped in his cage mainjutsu. "You fool!" Homura screamed as she stood to her feet, shaking slightly. Blood ran from the top of her forehead and the side of her mouth. "That brat could give birth to a glorious new clan, but you dash. I suggest you leave now," Jiraiya said menacingly as he walked out of the hospital room and into the hallway. He was glaring at Homura and his gaze flickered slightly when Koharu slipped past him and started to push Homura along. "Go, it isn't worth it," he muttered, and the two disappeared around a corner farther down the hall. Jiraiya glared for a little bit before he turned. "Inoichi, you're going to be dealing with their hate for a while. They'll go out of their way to make your life hell," he said with a small chuckle, but Inoichi replied with a vicious retort, all his anger and fury aimed at the wrinkled elders. "How dare they suggest my daughter be a concubine?" he said, and felt control of his body return to him. "I have half a mind to chase them down and finish them. Kami knows they have been causing enough problems for the council. I could end it in any threat to my daughter," the blonde father said through his teeth as he stormed back into the room through the doorway, which was missing a door now. "But you won't, right?" Jiraiya asked as he followed the man into the room. Inoichi was at his daughter's side and Izumi wasted no time in wrapping her arm around her husband, melting into his side as she laid a hand on her daughter's leg gently, tears brimming in the blonde woman's eyes. "Want to know why? Because, you want to be able to get the little fuck, so do I. The last thing I want is Orochimaru to get his hands on Sasuke, but let's face the facts. Orochimaru can keep himself and Sasuke hidden until the time that he takes the boy's body. If you want to have justice served, we have to get to Sasuke in the next 3 years," Jiraiya said, and Inoichi looked at him, a look of grim understanding in his eyes. "How long will it take us to find them?" he asked. His tone of voice made many shiver. This wasn't just a man going after a traitor, this was a father. A true father that was going to bring to justice the one who harmed his daughter. "Forever," Jiraiya said with a scowl. "That snake can hide when he wants. In fact, if we go to find him, there is someone we need to find first," Jiraiya said grimly and looked around the room, his eyes briefly settling on Sakura before they returned to Inoichi, who was staring at him, his eyes dull and blank. "There is only one other person besides you that hates Sasuke with a passion, only one other person that would hunt the boy down for what he has done to Ino," Jiraiya said, and Sakura couldn't help but speak up. "Shikamaru?" she asked, and Jiraiya laughed and waved his hand. "Not the lazy Nara," the hermit muttered and looked at Sakura. "The person we have to try to find left a while before Sasuke. We have to find one Uzumaki Naruto," Jiraiya said, and the room seemed to freeze over. "He will be the one to end the Uchiha. When do we leave to find him?" Inoichi asked after a few minutes of silence. His resolve was strong, he wouldn't back down. He couldn't be kept in the village since he retired a few years ago, and he could leave Izumi with the clan head responsibilities while he was gone. "Today if you want. I have a feeling that Naruto won't be too happy. In fact, I think we will find Sasuke rather quick," Jiraiya said darkly before turning away from those in the room and walked towards the window. "I'm going to notify the Hokage that we are going to attempt to find the boy who ran one more time." With that, Jiraiya leaped out of the open window and disappeared from sight. "Naruto?" Sakura thought as she stared at the window that the man had just jumped out the window. "It's been so long," she thought, and then her gaze flickered over to her best friend, her comatose best friend. "Please Naruto," she thought as a tear formed. "Please kill that worthless bastard." XXXXX. Uzugakur, Hidden Chamber. 8:46 p.m. "No way." Naruto growled as he took a challenging step backwards, his feet dragging as he tried to put at least a small amount of distance between himself and Taka and Zabuza. "I've held the fox back for..." Naruto trailed off as he tried to think about how old he was now. "I was 13 when I graduated, 14 at the Chunin exams. A year passed. 15 years. I don't think I want to chance letting it go now. All for what? Naruto said as he tried to throw his hands in the air in a surprised gesture, but he found the weights to be like anchors, only allowing him to raise them a few inches before they dropped back to his sides. Damn weights, damn Zabuza, damn fox. Naruto growled mentally. All for chakra control, Taka said with a scowl on her face. She had already explained the whole thing to the boy, but trying to get things through to him was harder than getting a Wagakuer to forgive the yondaime. I told you what we must do. If we can pull this off, then you'll no longer have to deal with the Kyuubi's influence and you'll be able to control your chakra. Taka said, and Zabuza nodded beside her in agreement. The chances of failure are high, but I know that you can do it, especially if I lend my strength. His uncle said as he crossed his arms in front of his chest, expecting Naruto to get the bigger picture. The blonde boy just continued to scowl at both older ninja though, making Zabuza sigh in frustration. Listen here, Zabuza said darkly and took a step forward towards Naruto. You're going to be the leader of this village, right? Sometimes it takes sacrifices, daring chances, and loss in order to keep your people alive. Do you want to be a chicken shit and let your people die because you were afraid to face your demon? You held it back for 15 years, you say? Zabuza asked, and Naruto glared at him before nodding sharply. Then prove who the master is. If you can hold back the strongest Biju, then I'm sure you can hold it back for a few minutes so we can place the new seal. Zabuza said and looked at his nephew sternly. You have to do this, if not for yourself then do it for those close to you. The man said, and that was the end of it, only silence followed afterwards. In this silence Taka stared at the blonde boy, her contempt and disgust with him very obvious, if not for some unknown reason. Zabuza began to second-guess his judgment of the blonde. He had thought the boy was brave, but now he was having other thoughts. Naruto was staring at the ground in anger, shame, and fear. He had already wasted a year of his life battling one demon, now he had to face the other demon, the one that was most likely stronger than she. The blonde clenched his fists together as he tried to clarify his thoughts, tried to dive through the jumbled emotions and get to the center of his heart, the place where the answer would lie. Tell me, exactly what has to happen. I don't want a half-assed version of what we need to do. Naruto said as he brought his gaze up, his eyes were cold and serious. The normally soft and warm blue eyes were so fierce now, so deadly that Zabuza had a hard time believing that this was the same Naruto standing before him. Taka let a small smirk cross her face before she shook her head, tossing her blue hair out of her face. The seal placed on you now, it's weak and will probably break within the next 4 years. It's a very complex seal, very difficult to understand and replicate. I have a newfound respect for the yondaime for making something such as this, at the last moment nonetheless. The purpose of this seal is to bind the Kyuubi to you until you release it or you die, and throughout your life the seal will slowly allow the Kyuubi's chakra to filter into your system and join your own. Because of that, your chakra is always spiking randomly and you have horrible chakra control. Taka explained and crossed her arms in front of her chest and sighed. Now, Zabuza found me fairly early and requested that I begin working on a new seal, one that put this one here to shame. As your uncle said earlier, the Uzumaki were seal masters, the yondaime would be considered an amateur compared to some of our kinsmen. But, forgetting history, our clan created one of the most powerful seals, a seal that was usually always used to contain demons. The Uzumaki created the Jinchuriki seal. Taka said, and Naruto's serious eyes wavered for a brief second and he opened his mouth slightly before he clenched his fists. What do you mean? He asked in a hard whisper, his eyes boring into Taka as though they were searching her soul. What I mean is, the Uzumaki created a seal, very powerful indeed, that could seal any of the Biju within someone. Only thing is, that person didn't receive the demon's chakra, any benefits, they didn't even know they were there actually. But the most important difference between theirs and yours, was that the demon would break free when its jailer died. The Uzumaki didn't want to give so much power to one person and so they literally locked the demons away when they were sealed, but over time people were able to adjust the seal, technically they ruined it. Taka muttered and trailed off and looked at Naruto with a peculiar interest. But anyways, the seal that I am going to place on you, unless the Kyuubi manages to break free. Taka said as a side note and ignored the growl that came from Naruto's throat. The seal is a combination of the Uzumaki's seal and your own seal. It took a long to perfect it, very dangerous also since I had to enter your containment cell in order to observe it. Taka said and Naruto gestured for her to continue. This bitch gets sidetracked easily. He thought with a mental sigh. Alright, this new seal can only be placed if we destroy the seal you have in place. As you already know, when that seal is removed the Kyuubi has a straight shot to freedom, only there is one thing that can stop it. That's you. You can't beat the fox, not at your strength now, maybe later in life but not now. All you have to do is hold it back for 20 minutes, that's it. I'll start working on the new seal as soon as you pull the old seal off. When I finish the seal we'll drag the Kyuubi back to its cage, or whatever thing binds the demon. Taka said and finished, her face blank and her eyes focused completely on the blonde in front of her. And what does this new seal do? Naruto asked with a tired sigh. So far it sounded like he would have his hands full. Taka chuckled, a chuckle that was devoid of any emotion. The new seal will take the Kyuubi with you when you die. The most important things it will do though, first it will completely restrict Kyuubi's chakra from entering your own system. If you had this seal in the first place this would be dangerous because if Kyuubi's chakra had somehow entered your system then you would be ripped apart. Taka said joyfully, enjoying the fact that Naruto was starting to get slightly worried. But now that you've had Kyuubi's chakra running through your system for 15 years your body is used to it. Of course I recommend that you train using the demon's chakra also so that you don't kill yourself from non-use and then you suddenly use it one day and, anyways. Since the Kyuubi's chakra will be trapped within the seal you will be able to use your own chakra, control it and everything. Since you won't have to worry about Kyuubi's random chakra intrusions and small doses being added to your system you will maintain a constant chakra frequency, which means you can finally get rather good chakra control. You will still be able to communicate with the demon and use his chakra, not even the strongest seal can force the demon to willingly give its chakra to you, siphon it slowly yes, and absorb it all no. You will still have your crazy amount of chakra as it is. Surprisingly the Kyuubi had little to do with that, you were born with rather large chakra coils and the Kyuubis made them slightly bigger and now you might lose maybe a small amount of your total amount but if my judgment is correct you still have the same amount if not more than a cage. Your stamina is all on you, you'll still have that. Your regeneration, the crazy ability you have to heal within a few minutes. I think that will remain because with every seal the demon within has a chance to escape and the Kyuubi will hope for freedom still one day. The final side effect that you will have is. Taka trailed off and gave him a small smirk. You won't have a berserker mode when you get angry anymore. Naruto was staring at the ground as he absorbed all of the information given to him. This new seal was only an upgrade that came at the cost of him releasing the most powerful Biju upon the world. Okay, let's do this. We are doing it right now, right? He asked and looked at his uncle who was nodding. Yeah, we won't be able to do it in the chamber, even though it would trap the Kyuubi for a couple weeks if it escaped. We can't use chakra in there and so it will be impossible to make a good seal. Zabuza muttered and Naruto tapped his chin in thought for a second. How are you going to help me? Naruto asked. He remembered Zabuza saying her would help him when it came time for him to hold the demon back. I'm going to fight by your side. Hopefully you won't be as weak on the inside as you are out here. Zabuza said and looked towards Taka who was kneeling on the ground waiting for the two to give the go-ahead. Let's get started now, I wants to get in the chamber as soon as possible. Naruto nodded and hesitantly kneeled in front of Taka, the women sighed before grabbing his shoulder, and in a display of great strength, slammed him painfully into the ground so that he was lying in front of her. Oh sorry I forgot. She muttered with a grin. I need you to take off your shit. I need to work with the seal so. She said and Naruto sighed before he pushed himself up and pulled the orange t-shirt off and laid it behind his head and as he started to lower himself down Taka sighed impatiently. Ouch. Naruto yelled and glared at Taka who had slammed him down into the ground again. The women rolled her eyes and watched as Zabuza knelt down on the other side of Naruto. Are we ready? He asked and both ninja nodded once. Naruto closed his eyes and before he entered his mental state he felt Zabuza's hand laid upon on his forehead. XXXXX. Hey furcoat. Naruto yelled as he drew close to the cage. He looked down at his body before he got any closer and he was shocked to find that he was wearing his training outfit which included his weights. The only thing that really changed was the fact that he was able to move with the weights on. Naruto flexed his muscles and was slightly shocked to find that they were much bigger than they were in the real world. Zabuza's wish came true, somehow I have my old strength back in here. Why complain? You there, fox? Naruto yelled again and waited. Silence followed though. What do you want, mortal? Kyuubi asked in its tone of hatred. Naruto watched as slowly Kyuubi repeated the same routine it repeated every time he came to see it. The fox slowly opened its eyes, its red pupils staring at Naruto with hatred and contempt. Why have you disturbed me? The fox growled and Naruto laughed and drew closer to the cage, water splashing around his ankles as he walked. Well, you see, in order to get stronger I got to get a new seal. Naruto said with a shrug. He couldn't show his fear to the fox lest the demon prey upon it, let the emotion give it strength. So I say we strike a deal. I beat you and you stop being an asshole to me and give me something I can use in a fight? All other Jinchuriki have something. Naruto said and stopped in front of the cage. Kyuubi watched him with anger, its eyes hovering mysteriously in the dark. You think I want to treat you with kindness? The fox barked and began to chuckle darkly, its laughter rumbling throughout the room. No deal. I only tolerated you back in your battle with the Goba to ensure my survival. The same applies to your fight with Shi. Why would I help you anymore? I give you the arrest means to survive and keep me alive. The Kyuubi growled and Naruto shrugged and grinned at the fox. I guess you don't want a chance at freedom. Naruto said and the fox's eyes flashed and slowly the beast's entire head came into view. The wicked grin that the fox had on its face made Naruto slightly shudder. Are you interested now? Naruto asked and the fox laughed, ignoring Naruto. I see I've been sleeping for too long. Kyuubi roared and Naruto felt his hair shift slightly as the beast glared at him. I'll accept your deal. I'll give you a great power if you release me and manage to defeat me. The Kyuubi said and watched with satisfaction as the seal, that kept the cage it was locked and closed, slowly began to lower down to Naruto's level. Naruto placed his hand at the top of the seal and stared at it for a little bit, making up his mind. Remember the last time we were in this position? I tricked you, that made me laugh so hard. Naruto whispered and with a great feat of mental, physical, and emotional strength, he ripped the seal off that was holding the Kyuubi back and jumped backwards, far away from the cage. Now you die, mortal. The Kyuubi roared and threw itself at the cage and at Naruto. Chapter 3, The Lost Emotion Part 1. Rise of Uzumaki. Now you die, mortal. The Kyuubi roared and threw itself at the cage and at Naruto. Its fangs were bared, saliva dripping from its eager mouth. The fox's eyes were wide with gleeful bloodlust, the red seemed to shine brightly. The Kyuubi slammed into the cage with its shoulder causing the entire room to shake, and the metal bars to swing open and slam into the walls where they melted and became nothing. Naruto stared at the giant fox in awe, a fearful awe. The Kyuubi emerged from the cage in a crouch, prepared to pounce on the blonde and get revenge for its imprisonment for the least 15 years. The beast was huge compared to Naruto and seemed like the room they were in expanded and warped until they were surrounded by white wall. The water that had originally been there was gone and in its place was a white marble floor. Naruto took a step back as he stared at the demon, its orange fur rippled, its white claws dug into the ground and the fox snarled at Naruto. I've waited for this day for 15 years, the day that I would be able to rip you apart. The Kyuubi roared and raised its giant paw and brought it down on Naruto. It whistled as it flew through the air, and Naruto felt the wind under the paw pushed downwards, forcing him to cover his face with both arms to protect his face. Don't just stand there. He heard a voice scream and then before he could respond he was hit hard from the side and he and whatever hit him went rolling to the right, just in time to dodge the Kyuubi's claw that slammed into the ground where he had once stood, destroying the marble. Naruto coughed as he opened his eyes and looked around, slightly confused as to what was going on. As he looked around his gaze fell upon his uncle who was crouched and staring at the giant fox, his sword drawn and held out to his left with one hand while his right was down on the ground supporting him so he could jump any way faster. Thanks, Naruto. Muttered as he got to his feet and stood behind Zabuza in a loose fighting style, ready to dodge any more attacks that the Kyuubi might try to use. So tell me. Naruto said as he watched the Kyuubi swivel its head and glare at both of the Uzumaki. How are we going to beat it? Naruto asked and Zabuza snorted and jumped high in the air, but not before answering Naruto. We're not. He roared and started making hand seals quickly. He landed on the serpent seal and bellowed as the marble floor began to crack and mist began to seep upward from the marble. The mist spread across the ground and began to rise steadily until it submerged the lower half of the room. Naruto cursed as his vision was obscured. He hadn't used the mist technique for what seemed like forever and he wasn't prepared to fight a giant demon in it right now. We just have to hold him back for 20 minutes, remember? Zabuza whispered behind him suddenly and Naruto slightly stiffened out of shock. The man was a master at using this technique and of course he could sneak up behind Naruto, in his own mindscape. I was only able to obscure the lower half of the room but that gives us an advantage. The Kyuubi is high above the mist. The only thing that is blocked from view are his claws and lower legs and body, but most importantly, us. Zabuza finished and Naruto nodded, not knowing if the man could sense that he had just done so. How long have we been in here since I released the Kyuubi? Naruto asked in a hushed voice. He felt the ground shake as the Kyuubi roared furiously and slammed a clawed hand down looking for them. 2 minutes, this mist might keep us from his view for maybe 5 minutes. Zabuza muttered and grabbed Naruto and ran, in which direction Naruto wasn't sure but he knew that it was away from the demon. Face me, you worthless scum. My teeth need cleansing and your blood will make them gleam. Kyuubi roared and Naruto wasn't able to see it but the beast raised its right arm and swung it diagonally, scattering the mist. What Naruto did know is that he and Zabuza were sent hurtling towards the ground and the mist around them swirled wildly before it was blown away, revealing their position. Or it might not last at all. Zabuza roared as he rolled to his feet and ran towards the Kyuubi. The fox snarled and brought his claw down on the man, or at least tried to. Zabuza, seeing the threat, jumped backwards, narrowly avoiding the claw that slammed into the ground making it shake. The man teetered for a second before he dived forward and landed on the fox's claw and stabbed his sword into Kyuubi's claw, all the way up to the hilt. AHH. The Kyuubi roared in agony and lifted its paw and brought it to its mouth, ready to eat Zabuza alive. Naruto watched as Zabuza quickly began making hand seals again and as the demon's jaws opened wide, its teeth gleaming, a funnel of water formed behind Zabuza and exploded outwards, straight into Kyuubi's mouth and down its throat doing a good amount of damage. Sutten, Daibakufu no Jutsu. The man roared the technique's name as he grabbed the hilt of his sword and ripped it free of the demon's paw and dived forward and spun in midair until he came down on the Kyuubi's, now closed, snout and landed on its nose. Zabuza proceeded to raise his sword high and was about to slam it into the demon's nose but the Kyuubi growled darkly and flicked its claw, which was already near its face, at Zabuza, and managed to hit the man that was annoying it. Shit. Zabuza. Naruto roared as the man flew towards the ground at speeds that would make Guy jealous. Naruto could only watch as Zabuza smashed into the ground, destroying the marble beneath him and creating a crater filled with destroyed rock. Naruto dashed forward, watching the Kyuubi out of the corner of his eye. The demon was licking its injured claw and glaring at the blonde, blood dripping from its wounded mouth which would most likely heal within the next few seconds. Naruto drew close to his injured uncle and fell to his knees, sliding across the marble and to the edge of the crater. Are you dead down there? Naruto asked with a shaky voice and he heard a groan of protest. He watched as Zabuza pushed a large chunk of marble off himself and slowly rolled over and got on one knee. Blood was pouring from deep gouges on his chest and arms, a splinter or stake of marble was speared through his calf and his sword was embedded deep within the rock. I'm done, kid, he might actually kill me in here. Zabuza said and coughed up some blood and gave Naruto a thumb up. I wasted 5 minutes though, you just got to hold him back for 11 more, got it? Zabuza said, his body faded from view followed shortly by his sword. Naruto groaned as he turned back to the giant demon that was grinning at him like the fox it was. I fucking hate you. Naruto growled and the Kyuubi chuckled darkly. I think I will toy with you and enjoy your anguished cries and pleas for mercy. Kyuubi roared and reared its head back and a ball of fire began to form in front of the demon's mouth, fueled by a steady flame that seemed to stream from the back of the demon's throat. As the Kyuubi prepared its attack, Naruto stared at the demon in pure shock. The rat bastard doesn't know. Naruto thought with glee as he got ready to dodge the attack. Too bad I'll die despite that fact. I know exactly what attack he's about to use. Naruto finished with a sad look. He had watched the Kyuubi turn a Biju entirely into glass with the attack it was about to use. The giant ball of flaming destruction would make short work of the blonde. Worry not, my son. Naruto stiffened as he heard the voice, and stared at the Kyuubi in horror as the demon shot its head forward, launching a large fireball at Naruto's frozen form. A grin was wide on Kyuubi's face as he saw Naruto's horror-struck face and could sense the despair and fear radiating from the boy. "Oh, and I Katon, Nagarabashi. Still being a nuisance, I see, Kyuubi," a soft feminine voice said, and as soon as the last word was said a woman appeared in front of Naruto and raised her palm, catching the giant ball of flames. The Kyuubi roared in anger as its attack was halted from destroying its target, and Naruto was assisted by yet another person. "Can I ask you for a few moments of Naruto's time?" the woman asked, and the Kyuubi response was to jump at her, claws outstretched, prepared to rip her to shreds. "I see," she muttered and lowered her head sorrowfully. "What the hell?" Naruto muttered. "Sit, you worthless fucking excuse of a fox." The women screamed and black chains erupted from the walls, floor, and ceiling and impaled Kyuubi's body, holding it in place. "We'll be right back," she said and turned towards Naruto and smiled. "Won't we?" XXXXX. Konohagakure, Hokage office. 10:01 a.m. "That's a very funny joke, Jiraiya. Now why are you here?" the Hokage asked as he stared at his student with a serious and weary look. His hands were clasped together in front of his face, his elbows on the desk he was sitting at. Jiraiya stood in front of him, as hands crossed in front of him, a somewhat impatient look on his face. "Sarutobi-sensei," Jiraiya muttered and chuckled. "You know I'm as serious as I can be in this situation. We know Orochimaru wants to take over Sasuke's body, and his last body exchange was shortly after the Chunin exams, which means..." Jiraiya trailed off, the unsaid ending hanging in the air where the Hokage snatched it and said it. "We have 2 years left to stop him before he gets his hands on the Sharingan," the Hokage muttered, and he let a tired sigh escape his lungs and he closed his eyes. "Jiraiya, I'm ashamed to say it, but some of our best ninja have already searched for Naruto and none have found him. I even have heard rumors that Kakashi has looked for the boy," the Hokage muttered, and Jiraiya shrugged, his eyes closing, and his face one of boredom. I think I have a good idea of where to look. The boy is a Sutin user, right? There are only a few places he could go, that he would go. We know that he's traveling to with Momoichi Zabuza also, so that limits that places even more," Jiraiya said and rubbed his left eye and yawned. "And if he isn't working on his water jutsu, then he's bound to be in the land on iron mastering his kenjutsu and learning a shitload more," Jiraiya said, and the Hokage nodded, thinking about the information that Jiraiya had just presented. The old man let out a sigh as he realized he was getting into a mess that was sure to give him a headache that put all others to glorious shame. "Let's say you're right. Let's say Naruto is in one of these other villages. What makes you sure that other ninja from our village haven't already checked these places out?" the Hokage asked, and Jiraiya chuckled lightly. The white-haired Sunin looked at his sensei with a look of disbelief and laughed a bit louder. "You're an old fool, sensei," Jiraiya accused and slapped his forehead, punishing himself for holding his sensei in such high regard. "This is the boy who painted the entire Hokage monument without ninja noticing him, ran from Genin, Chunin, Jonin, and even Umbu sometimes and was never caught, the boy who was able to sneak into the Hokage's house and steal the forbidden scroll of secrets." Jiraiya bellowed, and the Hokage sighed as he realized where this was going. "What makes you think he couldn't hide from some stupid ninja out for his head?" Jiraiya asked, all his playfulness gone suddenly, replaced by coldness. "I guess you're right, but still, even if I gave you the go-ahead, I must confer with the council," the Hokage muttered, and Jiraiya snorted. "Then let us go. I wish to leave later today if possible. The sooner we get rid of Sasuke the better," Jiraiya said and turned on his heel and walked from the office, the exasperated Hokage behind him. XXXXX. Konohagakure, Council Chambers. 10:58 a.m. "What an outrageous claim. You called us here for that?" a civilian council member cried in outrage, his face flushed as he found out that he was called in for a sudden meeting for Jiraiya's request. The Sunin was standing in the middle of the chambers, the clan heads, minus Inoichi who stood next to him, were on his right, the civilian council was to his left, and straight in front of him was the Hokage, Koharu, and Homura. "Sensei, why is the civilian council here again?" Jiraiya asked with a bored look. He reached up with his right hand and with a sigh he scratched the inside of his ear with his pinky, ignoring the civilian who shouted. "They like to complicate things for us," he muttered, and Inoichi grunted in agreement. "This is a matter that affects us all. If we go on with your request, then the civilians will lose someone akin to a role model to them. Everyone in this village loves the Uchiha," Danzo said as he stared at Jiraiya with his single eye. His voice was emotionless, his face completely blank. It almost made him seem as though he wasn't biased to the whole situation. "Ah, role model my ass," Jiraiya said and crossed his arms and pointed at a random civilian, a woman with shoulder-length brown hair. "You want your son to look up to a rapist?" he asked and turned to the man next to him. "And do you want your daughter to hang out with the boy who looks up to a rapist and will follow in his footsteps?" he asked and watched as the two civilians' mouths opened and closed and remained that way. "Back to your request," Homura snapped, her eyes boring into Inoichi's as she spoke. "We will not allow you to leave. We will organize special teams to retrieve Uchiha Sasuke. We won't waste your time in finding him," she said, and Jiraiya chuckled lightly and looked at Inoichi. "They won't waste my time, he said, and Inoichi chuckled darkly in response. "Woman, I got nothing but time for a traitorous rapist." Jiraiya roared at Homura and she promptly sniffed and raised her chin, as though she was dismissing Jiraiya's statement as nothing more than trash. "Besides, like I already stated," the white-haired man said and looked at his sensei, who was looking at Jiraiya, with a glazed look showing that he was slightly detached from the proceedings. "We are also going to find Naruto and have him help us," Jiraiya said, and his statement caught the attention of a few people gathered in the room. "Going to snare the fox, eh? About time we went after him," a fat civilian said and chuckled, his laugh making Jiraiya scowl. "Been nothing but trouble, what, with his accusations against Sasuke and others," the man exclaimed and began coughing into his sleeve from laughing. "What do you propose to do with Naruto when you find him, may I ask?" Homura asked with distaste, the name making bile rise in her throat, or it seemed that way. "Bring him back to the village? He won't last a day within these walls before he is torn apart," she said matter-of-factly. "Oh no!" Inoichi exclaimed, speaking up for the first time. "We plan to ask for his help in fighting Sasuke. If you remember correctly, Orochimaru has an elite guard in Kabuto. Me and Jiraiya will have to fight against them as it is. We are going to ask Naruto to finish what he started back at the Chunin exams and also before he left," Inoichi said, and after he finished speaking he heard several cries of disbelief and protest. "Silence," the Hokage said with a sigh, his hand resting on the side of his face as he looked at Jiraiya. He had already heard the proposal, but he had to still act businesslike and get answers for everyone who didn't know already. "What do you plan to do with Naruto after you finish with Orochimaru and Sasuke?" the Hokage asked curiously. Jiraiya had never told him about the "what happens now. We go our separate ways," Jiraiya said with a shrug. "I doubt he wants to come back. He has stayed away for a year, and I don't think I have the strength to kill my student, who has done nothing wrong," Jiraiya said and looked towards Inoichi, who was nodding in agreement, his face still dark and his eyes focused on Homura. "I won't raise a hand against the boy either. If he fights for my daughter, then he hasn't done anything wrong to me. He treated her with respect while he was here, and so I can only assume that he isn't hell-bent on destroying our village, so he can't be a real threat." Inoichi spoke and someone cleared their throat, commanding the attention of several people. "I agree with Inoichi. Naruto doesn't seem like the type to try to destroy his home village. The only thing that concerns me is that another village may get their hands on him and do to what he holds," Danzo said, letting the rest of the sentence hang in the air, letting everyone else make their own assumptions. "I say you guys go and search for both Naruto and Sasuke and bring them back." Inuyasha growled from her spot, getting the attention of everyone. No one from the clan side had spoken up in the matter, but now it seemed as though they were offering their input. "I know Naruto can be a little fierce. He reminds me of my clansman. He is loyal, or was until we messed up, but still he has had a year to get revenge on us, and honestly," Some said, and with a throaty chuckle that sounded more like a growl, "we all know that he jumps into things without giving much thought on the matter," she said, and she heard a few people laugh and agree with her. If he was going to get his revenge, he would have done it by now. Besides, there are people in this village who he still loves, so I doubt that he will try to destroy us. Sasuke, on the other hand, he needs to be killed or placed in the most secure prison that we can offer. I say we lock him in the basement of a clan compound like the Hyugas. Some finished with a growl, and many people looked at her curiously, and then their attention shifted to Hayashi to see what he would say. I must ask, Tsum, why do you propose that he be locked within my compound's basement? Hayashi asked, raising an eyebrow. Cause you guys wouldn't waste time poking that bastard in the heart and ending his existence. Don't try to say you guys don't hate the Uchiha. Tsum said and grinned at Hayashi. Unless you have some positive feelings towards Sasuke. She asked, and Hayashi's face, which was already blank, seemed to become even blanker, almost pale at the thought of liking Sasuke. No, I do not. He muttered, and Tsum laughed at his expression. Neither do I. But I must ask, why do we feel the need to unleash Uzumaki Naruto upon the boy? Does he deserve such punishment? Abarame Shiba asked in his emotionless and calculating tone. Many people were shocked to hear the man speak up, but Jiraiya wasted no time in answering his question. Okay, we don't have enough time to answer every question in existence right now, no offense to you Shiba, since you bring up a good point. Bottom line is this. Jiraiya said and looked at everyone. Sasuke went to Orochimaru, who is going to take his body and acquire the Sharingan. I want one person in here to try and tell me that Sasuke can beat Orochimaru. Jiraiya challenged, and he heard no one try to defend the Uchiha boy, and so he continued. You guys think Sasuke is strong and the Sharingan is the village's most powerful weapon? Imagine what happens when the man that hates our village, more than the Kyuubi does, acquire it. We are dead. Bottom line. Jiraiya said, and he saw many pale and heard many gasps. Are you sure about this? Shikaku asked, and Jiraiya chuckled. Yes, Orochimaru wants that. He said as much a year ago, which reminds me, he will take Sasuke's body in 2 years. We have never been able to find and capture Orochimaru in the last 20 years, so what makes us think we can do it in these next 2? Here's what. A blonde who never gives up, a father who wants revenge, and me, who wants to rid this earth of a traitorous teammate. That's why we release Naruto upon Sasuke. He won't give up, especially when he hears about what the brat did to Ino. Jiraiya said, and he saw a few nods on the civilian side, surprisingly, and all of the clan heads nodded. Okay Jiraiya, your request sounds reasonable. But Inoichi, if you leave, who will take your place? The Hokage asked warily, already dreading the answer. Izumi. Inoichi spoke, and many people paled. No, not again. A civilian whispered in horror, a hand unconsciously reaching up and touching his cheek where he had been hit by a frying pan by the blonde woman. All right, you may try to find Naruto and Sasuke, but I warn you. The Hokage said, and Jiraiya cocked his head at him. If I get any complaints from another village when Naruto goes berserk, it's coming out of your hide. Am I clear? The Hokage demanded. Hi. Jiraiya said with an amused expression. Hi. Inoichi said darkly. Who knows if Naruto will even be able to get a piece of Sasuke when the time comes. The man thought as he pictured himself tearing into the raven-haired teen. Soon Ino, soon you will be avenged. XXXXX. Who are you? Naruto whispered and looked around wildly. The sound of Kyuubi's growls were gone, and in fact everything was gone. There was nothing but pure white now, no walls, no floor, nor was there a ceiling. Naruto looked back towards the women and took in her features carefully, trying to see if he recognized her. Red hair that hung down past her shoulders, down to her lower back, and looked silky soft. She wore a red dress that was tied around her waist with a black belt, and her eyes were a deep green. She looked to be in her 20s, not much older than Zabuza in fact. Where are we? He whispered, and the woman giggled into her hand that she brought up to her mouth. Naruto. She said, and cocked her head at him. You don't know who I am? She asked in a playful tone and took a step towards him, and he took a step back. The woman paused, a hurt look crossing her face for a second before she sighed. I guess you wouldn't know. She whispered sadly. She looked at Naruto, her eyes piercing his, and Naruto froze, a warm feeling flooding through him. He had seen those eyes before, sometime in the past. Those eyes had looked upon him with the same kindness. Naruto took a hesitant step forward and he felt the warmth grow, and soon in his mind a picture began to form. A woman holding him and smiling, but he only saw her green eyes. "Are you recognizing me now?" she asked in a hopeful tone. I've seen you before, in my past," he whispered and took another step forward so that they were only a few feet apart. A face appeared in his mind and he saw himself, small, swaddled in blankets, his small arms waving. "No," he whispered as a word began to form in his mind. "It can't be, you're dead," he said and froze, but the warmth stayed within him, still touched every part of his body and beckoned him forward. "Yes, Naruto, I'm your mother," Kushina said as she smiled at her son. She swooped forward and wrapped her arms around Naruto's stiff form, making the boy stare over her shoulder at the white nothingness in shock. "Mother?" he asked as tears formed in the corner of his eyes. Kushina laughed and took a step back, her hands on his shoulders still. He was the same height as her, maybe a bit taller, but still she held him as though he was smaller than her. She smiled brightly at him, showing her pearly white teeth. "The one and only," she said and stepped back and placed her hands behind her back nervously. "So, I see you're fighting the Kyuubi, she asked and Naruto nodded slowly before he shook his head. "How are you here?" he asked as he wiped away at his tears furiously, trying to hide his embarrassment. "How long?" he asked and Kushina shrugged and looked at her imaginary watch, making her son laugh slightly. "I don't know, an hour, a year, forever," she muttered and raised her hands. "I guess for a while," she said and Naruto nodded and looked away hesitantly. "What is it?" she asked and he shook his head sadly and stared at her. "I wish you had come maybe 5 or 6 minutes ago," he muttered and she stared at him curiously, her green eyes shining. "Why's that?" she asked and Naruto hesitated before he answered his mother. "Zabuza was here, fighting the Kyuubi with me," he said and he watched at Kushina stiffened at the mention of her brother. She stared at Naruto in disbelief and brought her right hand up and rested it on her heart. "Zabi-chan was," she whispered and tears formed in her eyes. "I thought he was dead," she whispered and wiped her tears away as they began to flow. "Oh well. I guess if you snooze you lose," she said half-heartedly and Naruto shook his head. I can tell him anything you might want to say. But first, I want to be selfish," the blonde boy said with a chuckle and ran forward and hugged his mother tightly again, enjoying her embrace as she wrapped her arms around him. How did you, die?" Naruto sobbed into her shoulder and Kushina brought a hand up and stroked his head softly, trying to ease his pain. "When the Kyuubi attacked, you had to become the host for the demon. I was there when Kyuubi was being sealed, watching over you. I was prepared to grab you after the demon was sealed, but something happened. Before the Kyuubi was entirely sealed away, he tried to kill you, he came so close but I threw myself in front of the fox's attack and Kami smiled upon me that day. I was able to deflect the attack but in the process I died and was caught in the crossfire of the sealing and was also sealed away." Kushina whispered into his hair as she kept rubbing it affectionately. Thank you, Naruto whispered as tears continued to soak her shoulder. He had never been able to cry on someone's shoulder like this, he finally had the chance to do so with his mother. "My life has sucked, but Zabuza he helped me," Naruto whispered and pulled away from his mother's shoulder and wiped his tears away with the back of his right hand. "He better be," Kushina said with a small laugh and wiped her own tears away. "Naruto, you asked how much time I had here? I lied. I only have a small amount of time and in that time I want to tell you some things," Kushina said and Naruto nodded and followed his mom's lead as she sat down on the white floor that really didn't exist. "What is it?" Naruto asked and Kushina laughed and looked at him. "I fear that you'll have to fight a demon within yourself one day, it's powerful but Kushina began but she was interrupted by Naruto's sudden laughter. "What's so funny?" she yelled and was about to punch Naruto when he slowly began to stop laughing until he was able to speak again. "I already fought that demon. His name was Shi and he explained everything to me, you were one of the only 2 female Uzumaki to beat their demon," Naruto exclaimed and his mom smiled as he started talking about how cool that was. "Naruto, we don't have much time," she said and patted him on the shoulder. I know it's awesome, but it's even cooler that you were the first and only male to ever beat his inner demon. Now, when you beat your demon, did it offer you power? Did you absorb it? Kushina asked and Naruto shrugged. Nah, I got something cooler instead, but I don't want to take it out, it's a big secret. Naruto said and stared at the ground for a bit. Really? Kushina asked curiously and Naruto laughed. Nah. He exclaimed and jumped to his feet. He held his hand out and waited for Ranjin to appear, but it didn't. He stared at his open palm, as did his mother, with confusion. Okay, never mind, it didn't work. He muttered and sat down. What was supposed to happen? I can see the markings on your hand and everything, but... Kushina muttered as she stared at her son's palm. He green eyes tried to figure it out, but she couldn't come up with an answer. I got a sword, pretty awesome sword. The Ranjin. It chose me for some reason and then I absorbed chi into the sword. Naruto said as he sat down and Kushina stared at him, mouth slightly open in shock. The woman shook her head in disbelief and put her fingers on her forehead as she laughed lightly. Well, then. I guess I can move on to the next thing. If you've been with Zabuza, then you know about your heritage and title. She asked, and after Naruto nodded she continued. Okay, well, the final two things that I need to tell you are these. First off, do you know that our clan has a bloodline? Kushina asked and watched as Naruto stiffened and stared at her in shock. What? He exclaimed, a look of pure shock crossing his face. Kushina chuckled lightly at his expression and nodded. Yes, we have the ability to use Ranten Jutsu, the storm release bloodline. Very powerful, but hard to control. I'd give you a huge lesson on it and tell you to be careful and everything, but Zabuza should know where the clan scrolls are. I want you to read everything, everything. She said seriously and Naruto nodded, allowing her to continue. Second. I want to ask you a huge favor. Tell Zabuza, tell him that I love him and that I forgive him. I know he never meant what he said and that it didn't burden me when I died, and I regret saying anything I ever said to him. If he doesn't believe you, tell him that I said, I love you, Zabi-chan, try not to cut your head off with your stupid sword. Kushina said with a chuckle and Naruto laughed. Actually, he's a part of the Seven Swordsmen, or well, he used to be until a bunch of drama happened. Then we met up and here we go. Naruto said with a chuckle and laid back and stared at the nothingness. I have so much to tell and ask you, where I should start I don't know. Naruto muttered. Kushina smiled at her son and was about to shift her feet when she found that they were unresponsive. The woman looked down and her heart broke when she saw that her legs were transparent and were fading. Naruto. She whispered. Oh, I should tell you about what I was able to do. I was able to master the Yondame's technique in 22 days. The raise non, it was so awesome. Naruto said and sat up and looked at his mom. What's up? He asked, and the woman stared at him in shock before her face turned to one of sorrow, her head nodded down towards her legs. It's time. She whispered and Naruto looked down and saw that her legs were disappearing, the transparency was spreading upwards. But I didn't get to tell you about the raise non. Naruto whispered and suddenly his mom's eyes widened. How could I be so stupid? She groaned and was prepared to slap her forehead but found that her arm was now transparent. Naruto, in Konoha, do you know where the hill behind the Hyuga compound is? Kushina asked quickly and Naruto nodded slowly, he was tearing up as he watched his mother disappear. Yeah, why? He asked and scooted closer to her. There is a house up there, hidden within the forest. No one knew about it because there are powerful seals in place so that it is only detectable by those linked to it by blood. When you enter the forest you will see a large white rock. Cut your thumb and place your blood upon it, you should already be linked to it due to your father's blood. Afterwards keep walking forward and you'll see 5 more white rocks, do the same with each white rock. After you place your blood on all 5 rocks you'll see a house, place your blood on the scroll hanging from the door and you'll be able to enter. Kushina said, and she looked down and gasped when she saw that her entire body was now see-through, her head was the only thing still solid. The house is small. Single floor and single room with a bathroom. It's yours, but there's something more important than that. In the center of the room is a large futon mat that me and your father used to sleep on. Under it is a trapdoor that opens up to reveal a small cellar where me and your father have placed all of our scrolls and secrets. In there is your true inheritance. Kushina said in desperation, and Naruto nodded, and knowing that his mother's time was short he threw himself forward and wrapped his arms around her, shocking them both when he found herself caught in his hold. She hesitantly and hopefully raised her arms and was happy when they responded. She wrapped her son in the final hug he would receive from her, and she smiled. "I love you, Naruto," she whispered, and he nodded, fresh tears spilling down. "I love you to Mom," he whispered. "Make me and your father proud," Kushina said, and Naruto pulled away from her in shock and stared into her eyes. "Mom, my father. Who is he?" he shouted. He had forgotten all about the fact that he didn't know his father. Kushina's eyes widened and she began to speak to him in a quick tone. "Your fath, aim, S-N-A-Z-E-N-A-O. Then she was gone, just like that. Naruto had lost his mother again and his father's name escaped his grasp. "Damn it!" the boy shouted and slammed his fist down into the white floor, but nothing happened. His fist just stopped and he felt no pain. Naruto wiped away his tears and stood to his feet, and as he rose the room around him began to shift and warp until he was back with his old foe. The Kyuubi. The demon was still held by the chains, but when he appeared they began to fade, leaving a very angry demon. "That bitch. She dare hold me back." Kyuubi growled and then roared at Naruto, who stood with his head down, hair obscuring his features. "You weren't gone for that long, mortal. It seemed as though you disappeared and reappeared a few seconds later. Did you get some new power? A pitiful way to attempt to beat me." The Kyuubi roared and took a step forward, his anger radiating off of his body in waves. The demon was mad at everything in the world right now. He wanted to taste the blonde blood and flesh within his mouth, but people kept interfering. "Yeah, she gave me a new power. She gave me something I never had nor could I ever hope to get in my life, but now she gave it to me. She gave me a mother's love, something she could only give, and you know something, verbal?" Naruto asked in a cold and dark tone, making the Kyuubi stare at him with interest. "I found out why I never had that in the first place. I found out why I don't have that right now." The blonde growled. The Kyuubi began to grin as he saw Naruto about to give up. The boy was shaking in fear and sorrow. "Want to know what took that away?" Naruto asked, laughing slightly as he nodded his head at something. "What, you foolish mortal? End your games and let me feast on you already. I want my freedom." The Kyuubi roared and Naruto waited for the beats to become silent, and he slowly began to look up at the demon that crouched in front of him, waiting to pounce. "A stupid fucking, worthless flea bag. The thing that took my mother away from me," Naruto said, and his head snapped up. His eyes were so cold that they could freeze an ice cube. "Was you?" he hissed. The Kyuubi might have been angry, but Naruto was pissed and he no longer cared about holding the Kyuubi back. He wanted to kill the demon in front of him. This fight was personal. Check the description for the links to the author.